You found the Stealth Podcast. Tonight, we'll travel through dark and lonely stories. Where in the world are you watching from? What time is it there? Subscribe and leave your like to support us. Let's begin. I'm Riley Harper, 28 years old, and I hail from Portland, Oregon. Life up there's all misty rain and coffee shops, but I traded it for a beat-up cargo van I converted into my home on wheels. Been living the Vanlife dream for about a year now, chasing freedom and cheap gas. My setup's simple: solar panels, a mattress, a cooler that barely works, but it's mine. Last week, I decided to head down to Southern California. The plan was to park near the coast, maybe catch some sunsets in San Diego or Oceanside. I'd heard the beaches were killer, and I was itching to trade my raincoat for flip-flops. The drive down was smooth, just me and my playlist blaring through the van's crackly speakers. I crossed into California with the windows down, letting that dry, warm air hit my face. Southern California's got this vibe: sprawling highways, palm trees, and a promise of something wild. I'd been scrolling X for tips on stealth parking spots, places I could crash without drawing attention. Found a spot near Laguna Beach, tucked off a quiet road by some cliffs. Seemed perfect, right? Low-key, scenic, no parking signs to ruin my buzz. I pulled in around dusk, the sky turning this insane orange-purple mix. The ocean was crashing below, loud enough to drown out my thoughts. I popped the van's back doors, cracked a beer, and just soaked it in. Living like this, you feel untouchable, like the world's yours to take. My buddy Jake, who's still up in Portland slaving away at some desk job, keeps texting me pics of his cubicle like it's a cry for help. I sent him a shot of the sunset, captioned it "Sucks to be you." He didn't reply. Laguna's got this artsy, rich hippie feel. Fancy houses perched on hills, galleries everywhere, but down by the cliffs, it's raw. Just dirt and salt air. I figured I'd stay a couple nights, maybe surf if I could borrow a board. My van's got Oregon plates, so I parked it behind some bushes to keep it low profile. Last thing I need is some cop knocking on my window at 3 a.m. asking for ID. Been there, done that in Eureka, total buzzkill. Night fell fast, and I locked the doors, double-checking the latches. Habit from too many sketchy parking lots. I've got this little LED lantern that casts a soft glow inside, enough to read by. Pulled out a dog-eared Stephen King paperback. Dude knows horror, right? Figured it'd keep me company. The waves kept pounding, a steady rhythm that should have lulled me to sleep. But something felt off. Not sure what. Just an itch in my gut I couldn't scratch. I scrolled my phone for a bit. No signal out here, which wasn't a shock. Southern California's got its dead zones, especially off the main drags. I tossed the phone aside and leaned back, staring at the van's ceiling. It's got these little dents from a hailstorm last year, my battle scars. I was beat from the drive, eyes heavy, but that itch wouldn't quit. Maybe it was the isolation. Out here, it's just me, the van, and whatever's lurking beyond the windows. The air got cooler, seeping through the cracks I never got around to sealing. I zipped up my hoodie and tried to shake the feeling. Probably just tired, I told myself. Vanlife's got its highs, but it's not all Instagram vibes. Sometimes it's lonely as hell. I thought about texting Jake again, but no bars, no point. Instead, I cracked the window an inch for some air, listening to the night settle in around me. That's when I noticed it. The waves weren't the only sound anymore. Something else was out there, faint but steady. Not an animal, not the wind. I sat up, straining to hear it over the ocean's roar. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing, coming from the cliffs below. I laughed it off, probably just my imagination running wild after too much King. Still, I kept the window cracked, ears perked. I lay back down, telling myself to chill. It's just me out here, right? No one knows I'm parked in this spot. The van's my fortress, my little slice of safety. But as I drifted toward sleep, that sound stuck with me, creeping into my head like a bad dream I couldn't shake. Whatever it was, it felt closer than it should have. Morning hit me like a truck, sun blasting through the van's windshield, turning it into an oven. I woke up sweaty, tangled in my sleeping bag, that weird breathing sound from last night still echoing in my head. Figured it was just a dream, though, some leftover horror from reading King too late. I stumbled out of the van, stretching my legs, and took a look around. Laguna Beach sparkled below, all blue waves and golden sand. My spot by the cliffs was still hidden, van tucked behind those bushes like a pro. Felt good to nail the stealth part. I brewed some coffee on my little camp stove, the cheap instant kind that tastes like dirt but does the job. Sat on the tailgate, sipping it, watching a couple seagulls fight over something down by the water. My cooler was a mess. Ice melted, soaking my last pack of hot dogs. Great. Meant I'd have to hit a store later, but cash was tight. Been living off ramen and Goodwill for weeks. I debated driving into town, but gas isn't free either. Decided to ration what I had and stick it out another night here. That's when my phone buzzed. Finally got a bar of signal. Jake texted back, "Nice view, jerk. Don't get eaten by a shark." I grinned, typing a reply about how I'd rather face a shark than his 9 to 5. Sent it, but it didn't go through. Signal dropped again. Figures. I tossed the phone on the mattress and started tidying up. Vanlife's all about keeping your space tight, or it turns into a dumpster real quick. Found a sock I'd been missing for months under the seat. Small victories. Mid-morning, I hiked down to the beach, figuring I'd scope out the scene. Passed a few joggers, all decked out in fancy gear, giving me side-eye like I didn't belong. Guess my ripped jeans and faded hoodie screamed outsider. The water was cold as hell, but I waded in anyway, letting it wake me up. Kept thinking about that sound from last night. Maybe it was a seal or something, barking in the dark. Yeah, that made sense. Still, it nagged at me, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. Back at the van, I noticed something weird. The dirt around my tires was messed up. Not just my tracks, but these long, shallow grooves. Looked like something heavy got dragged nearby. Maybe a branch or trash from the cliffs. I kicked some dust over it, shrugging it off. Southern California's got its quirks, probably nothing. But as I climbed inside, I caught a whiff of something rank, like rotting fish. Checked my trash bag, empty. Sniffed the cooler, gross, but not that bad. It was coming from outside. I poked around the bushes, trying to track it. Found a pile of seaweed tangled in some rocks, slimy and stinking. Must have washed up in the night. Kicked it away and called it a day. But then I saw something else, a scrap of fabric caught on a branch, faded blue, torn like it had been yanked hard. Didn't look like mine. I grabbed it, turning it over in my hands. Felt old, damp, like it had been out here a while. Tossed it aside, but it left me uneasy, like I'd stumbled onto something I shouldn't have. By afternoon, the vibe shifted. Clouds rolled in, thick and gray, swallowing the sun. The cliffs loomed bigger somehow, casting this long shadow over the van. I tried to shake it off, firing up my stove for some noodles. Burned my finger on the pot, classic Riley move. Cursed loud enough to scare off a crow perched nearby. That's when I heard it again, that breathing sound. Clear as day, cutting through the wind. Not a seal. Too slow, too deep. Coming from the cliffs again. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth, straining to pinpoint it. The ocean was loud, but this was louder, closer. My heart kicked up a notch. Told myself it was nothing, just the wind playing tricks. But I couldn't eat after that. Kept glancing out the windows, expecting what? A bear? A creep? Nothing showed up, but the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I locked the doors early, even though it wasn't dark yet. Night crept in slow, and I couldn't sit still. Kept pacing the van, 3 steps one way, 3 back. That smell was back, fainter but there, sneaking through the cracked window. I slammed it shut, heart thumping. Decided I'd leave at first light. Laguna was starting to feel less like a paradise and more like a trap. But as I lay there, eyes wide open, that sound grew louder, closer, like it was right outside the van, waiting for me to slip up. I couldn't sleep. How could I with that damn breathing sound right outside my van? It was past midnight, and I was sitting up, back pressed against the wall, clutching a flashlight like it had saved me. The noise wasn't steady anymore. It had stopped, then start again, closer each time. My heart was hammering so loud I could feel it in my throat. I kept telling myself it was an animal, maybe a coyote sniffing around. Southern California's got those, right? But this didn't feel animal. It felt wrong. I flicked the flashlight on, aiming it out the window. The beam cut through the dark, bouncing off the bushes, but nothing moved. Just shadows and that stink. God, that smell was worse now, like something dead left out too long. I gagged, pulling my shirt over my nose. That's when the van rocked, just a little, like something brushed it. I swung the light around, hands shaking, but the windows showed nothing. My gut screamed at me to start the engine and peel out, but I was paralyzed, stuck listening. Then I saw it. Not clear, not full on, but a shape. Tall, hunched, slipping past the edge of the bushes. Too big for a coyote, too quiet for a person stumbling around. My breath caught, and I clicked off the flashlight, like that'd hide me. Dumb move, I know, but panic's not logical. The breathing stopped for a second, and I thought maybe it was gone. Then it came back, right by the back doors, so loud I could have sworn it was inside with me. I bit my lip to keep from yelling. I crawled to the driver's seat, keys jangling in my sweaty hands. The van's old. Takes a sec to turn over. Worst time for it to act up. I jammed the key in, twisted it, and the engine sputtered. Come on, come on. That's when something scraped the side. Slow, deliberate, like nails on metal. My skin went cold. I glanced in the side mirror, and there it was again. That shape, closer now, looming in the dark. Couldn't make out a face, just bulk and movement. Disturbing as hell. The engine finally roared to life, and I floored it, tires spinning in the dirt. Didn't care about stealth anymore, just wanted out. The van lurched forward, bouncing over rocks, and I thought I'd made it. But then the back window shattered. Glass sprayed everywhere, cutting my arm as I swerved. I screamed, couldn't help it. Something had hit it, hard, and I wasn't sticking around to find out what. The breathing was gone, replaced by this low, guttural growl that made my bones shake. I tore down the road, headlights slicing through the night, cliffs blurring past. Blood dripped down my elbow, warm and sticky, but I didn't stop to check it. My mind was racing. What the hell was that? Not a person, not an animal, something worse. I'd seen enough scary movies to know this was bad, but this wasn't a screen. This was me, alone, in a busted van with something chasing me. The growl faded, but I kept driving, heart pounding like it had bust out of my chest. I hit a paved road, some winding stretch near Laguna's outskirts, and slowed just enough to breathe. My arm stung, glass crunching under my boots as I shifted. Looked in the rear view, nothing but darkness behind me. Maybe I'd lost it. Maybe it was tied to that spot by the cliffs. I pulled over, hands trembling, and checked the damage. The back window was toast, frame bent like something heavy slammed it. No way that was random. I grabbed my phone, still no signal, of course. Wanted to call Jake, 911, anyone, but I was cut off. The van felt exposed now, wind whistling through the hole where the glass used to be. That smell crept in again, faint but there, like it had followed me. I locked the doors, even though that felt pointless. Whatever it was, it didn't care about locks. I sat there, staring out the windshield, waiting for my pulse to slow down. Then the growl came back, not behind me, but ahead, down the road. Low, rumbling, like it was calling me forward. My stomach dropped. This wasn't over. Whatever I'd pissed off back there wasn't done with me yet. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, trying to figure out my next move, knowing deep down I was in way over my head. I floored the gas, tires squealing as the van shot down that winding road. The growl was ahead, not behind, and that flipped every instinct I had upside down. My headlights caught nothing but asphalt and scrubby bushes, but I knew it was out there, waiting. Glass crunched under my boots, wind howling through the busted back window. My van was a mess, and I was a sitting duck. Blood trickled down my arm, soaking my sleeve, but I didn't have time to care. I just needed to get the hell out of Southern California. The road twisted sharp, cliffs on one side, a drop to the ocean on the other. I took a curve too fast, and the van fishtailed, scraping the guardrail with a shriek of metal. My heart was in my throat, almost went over right there. Kept driving, eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting that hunched shape to lunge out of the dark. The growl came again, closer, like it was pacing me. I pushed the van harder, engine whining. Old girl wasn't built for this kind of chase. Then I saw it, dead ahead, blocking the road. That thing, tall and wrong, just standing there. Couldn't make out details in the glare of my lights, but it was big, hunched, with limbs that didn't bend right. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop maybe 20 feet away. My chest heaved, sweat stinging my eyes. It didn't move, just stared, or at least, I think it did. No face I could see, just darkness where one should have been. Horror doesn't even cover it. This was pure, gut-twisting terror. I threw the van into reverse, tires smoking as I backed up. No way I was going through that thing. The growl turned into this sick, wet snarl, and it started moving. Slow at first, then fast, too fast. I spun the wheel, aiming for a dirt turnout I'd passed, praying it'd lead somewhere. The van bounced hard, suspension groaning, and I heard it hit. Something slammed the side, rocking me so bad I clipped my head on the window. Blood ran down my temple now, mixing with the mess on my arm. The turnout was a narrow trail, barely wide enough for the van. Branches clawed the roof, and I kept going, no clue where it had spit me out. The snarling was behind me now, loud and pissed. I glanced back, big mistake. It was there, tearing through the brush, keeping up like the van was nothing. My hands shook so bad I could barely steer. This wasn't a movie chase. This was me, Riley Harper, about to die in a shitty van in the middle of nowhere. The trail dumped me onto another road, paved. Thank God. I gunned it, pushing the van past its limit. The speedometer hit 70, shaking like it'd fall apart. That thing was still back there, a blur in the dark, but I was pulling ahead. My lungs burned, like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. Kept driving, signs for Laguna fading behind me. Didn't know where I was going, just away. The snarling got quieter, fainter, until it was gone. I didn't stop, though, not yet. I hit a gas station an hour later, some rundown joint off the 5 freeway. Pulled in, engine ticking as it cooled, and just sat there, shaking. Blood smeared the wheel, my shirt, everything. The attendant, an old guy with a lazy eye, gave me a weird look through the window, but didn't come out. I checked the mirrors, nothing. No growls, no shapes. The van was trashed, side dented, window gone, but I was alive. Barely. I stumbled out, legs like jelly, and grabbed a rag from the back to wipe my face. The cuts weren't deep, just messy. Looked around. Empty lot, flickering lights, middle of the night. Felt like I'd escaped, but that smell was still there, faint, clinging to the air. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and tried to think. Maybe it was over. Maybe I'd outrun it. But deep down, I knew better. Something that scary doesn't just let you go. I started the engine again, figuring I'd head north, back to Portland, anywhere but here. The van coughed, sluggish now, but it moved. I pulled onto the freeway, eyes glued to the road, praying I'd make it out of this alive. Every shadow made me flinch. Every noise had me gripping the wheel tighter. I wasn't safe, not yet. The freeway stretched out, endless and dark, as I pushed the van north. My head throbbed, blood drying sticky on my skin, but I kept driving. Couldn't stop. Stopping felt like inviting that thing back. I'd made it out of Laguna, past the gas station, and figured distance was my best shot. Portland was a long haul, but it was home, safe, far from whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into. The radio crackled static. No music, just noise, but I left it on for company. An hour in, the van started acting up. The engine sputtered, lights flickering on the dash. I cursed, smacking the wheel. Come on, not now? Pulled over on the shoulder, somewhere north of LA, surrounded by nothing but dry hills. Popped the hood, hands shaking as I checked the mess of wires and hoses. No clue what I was looking at. Mechanic skills aren't my thing. The night was quiet, too quiet, and that itch in my gut came roaring back. I grabbed my phone, still no signal, big surprise. Kept the hood up, figuring I'd flag someone down. A truck roared past, didn't even slow. Then a sedan, same deal. I was stranded, bleeding, with a van that might not start again. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, carried on the wind. That breathing sound. My stomach dropped. No way. I'd driven miles, left it behind. How could it be here? I slammed the hood shut, ready to try the engine again. The van turned over, barely. I peeled back onto the freeway, pushing it hard, but it was dying, slowing no matter how much I begged it to move. The breathing got louder, closer, like it was right outside. I looked in the mirror. Nothing, just black. But I knew. It had followed me, tracked me down. My big mistake was thinking I could outrun it, that a busted van and a full tank could save me from something that didn't play by normal rules. I swerved off an exit, some nowhere town called Gorman, hoping for lights, people, anything. The van coughed its last breath and rolled to a stop on a deserted street. No houses, just a shuttered gas station and a flickering streetlight. I locked the doors, heart pounding, and waited. The breathing was everywhere now, outside, inside my head, drowning out everything. I grabbed a tire iron from under the seat, stupid, but it was all I had. Something hit the van hard. The whole thing rocked, metal groaning. I yelled, swinging the tire iron at nothing. just air. The side window exploded inward, glass cutting my face this time. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. Huge, heavy, pressing in. The tire iron slipped from my hands. Useless. I scrambled for the door, thinking I'd run, but it was too late. That snarl filled the van, wet and close, and I knew I'd screwed up bad. I bolted anyway, tumbling out onto the pavement, scraping my knees bloody. Ran toward the gas station, legs burning, but it was on me. Fast, silent now, no more growling. Just wait in pain. I hit the ground, asphalt tearing my hands, and it was over me, a shadow I couldn't fight. Last thing I saw was the van, my home, sitting there under that flickering light, like it was waiting for me to come back. Jake will never know what happened. Phone's dead, no signal, no note. Maybe he'll see the van on some news report. Abandoned, blood everywhere. Southern California took me, chewed me up, and I didn't stand a chance. Should have stayed in Portland, safe behind a desk like him. My big adventure, my van life dream. It ended here, in the dirt, with something I'll never understand. The breathing stopped. So did I? I'm Tessa Monroe, 32 years old, and I'm from Boise, Idaho. Up there, it's all snow half the year and potatoes the other half. Nice, but boring as hell. 2 years ago, I ditched my cubicle gig, sold most of my junk, and bought a van. An old Ford Econoline I gutted and tricked out myself. Got a bed, a tiny sink, even a solar-powered fridge that actually works. Been chasing the open road ever since, living off savings and odd jobs. This month, I pointed the van south, aiming for Southern California. Heard the desert vibes out there were unreal. The drive from Boise was a slog. Hours of flat nothing. Then bam, mountains and heat hit you like a slap. I rolled into Joshua Tree National Park late afternoon, sun dipping low, painting the rocks this crazy gold. My plan was simple. Park off some back road, soak in the quiet, maybe sketch the weird trees for my Insta. I'd been scrolling X for spots, found one near a dry wash, hidden, no rangers bugging me. Pulled in, tires crunching on gravel, and killed the engine. Felt like I'd landed on Mars. I hopped out, stretching my legs, the air dry and warm even as night crept in. Joshua Trees got this eerie beauty. Twisted plants, big boulders, and silence that presses on your ears. I popped the van's side door, grabbed a soda from the fridge, and leaned against the hood. Watched the stars pop out, brighter than anything back home. My sister, Claire, keeps texting me pics of her kids, like I'm missing out. Sent her a shot of the desert sky. Beat this, Mama Bear. She just replied with an eye roll emoji. The spot was perfect. No headlights, no neighbors, just me and the van. I've got Idaho plates, so I parked behind a big rock to keep it stealthy. Learned that trick after a cop in Nevada rapped on my window at dawn. Total mood killer. Out here, though, it felt safe, like I'd scored the best seat in the house. I fired up my little propane stove, heated up some chili, and ate straight from the pot. Living simple's the dream, right? No rent, no rules. Night settled in fast, and I locked the doors, habit from too many nights in sketchy lots. My van's got blackout curtains I sewed myself, keeps it cozy and private. I flicked on a string of fairy lights, their soft glow bouncing off the wood paneling. Grabbed my sketchbook, started doodling a gnarled Joshua tree I'd seen earlier. The quiet was thick, just the hum of the desert outside. Felt good, like I'd finally found my rhythm after months on the road. Then the wind kicked up. Nothing crazy, just enough to rattle the curtains. I cracked the window a bit, letting the cool air sneak in. That's when I caught it. A smell, sharp and sour, like spoiled milk mixed with dirt. Checked my trash, empty. Sniffed the sink, clean. It was outside, drifting in from somewhere. I shrugged it off. Deserts get funky, right? Maybe a dead critter nearby. Closed the window and went back to sketching. I was halfway through shading when something thumped. Low, heavy, like a rock hitting the ground. Froze, pencil hovering over the page. It came again, closer, from the wash behind the van. My pulse picked up. Probably just a coyote or a kangaroo rat. I told myself, Southern California's full of weird wildlife. Still, I set the sketchbook down, listening hard. The wind died, but the thumps didn't. Slow, steady, moving toward me. I grabbed my flashlight, clicked it on, and aimed it out the side window. Beam hit the rocks, the scrub, nothing else. The thumping stopped, and I let out a breath. Okay, maybe I'd imagined the rhythm. Laughed at myself, nerves jangling. Too many late-night horror podcasts, Tessa. I turned the light off, ready to crash, but that smell was stronger now, seeping through the cracks. Made my stomach turn. I zipped my hoodie up, trying to ignore it. Lying down, I stared at the ceiling. My van's got these little stickers from every state I've hit, a map of my life. Idaho's was a potato, naturally. I was drifting off, eyes heavy, when the thump came again, right by the van this time. Loud, deliberate, like something testing the metal. I bolted upright, heart slamming. This wasn't a critter. Whatever was out there, it was big and barring the door, and it was way too close for comfort. I sat there, frozen, flashlight gripped tight, waiting for another thump. Nothing came, just that sour smell hanging heavy in the air. My heart was still racing, but I talked myself down. Probably just a desert thing, right? Joshua tree's wild. Could have been a bighorn sheep or something stumbling around. I flicked the flashlight back on, swept it across the windows again. Nada, just rocks and shadows. Still, I wasn't about to hop out and play detective in the dark. Morning couldn't come fast enough, but I wasn't sleeping after that. Kept the lights on, sipping warm soda to stay awake. My van's battery's solid. Solar keeps it juiced, but I didn't want to risk it dying out here. Checked my phone. No bars, of course. Middle of nowhere. Tessa, what did you expect? I thought about texting Claire anyway, just to feel less alone, but it'd sit unsent till I hit civilization. Made me miss her nagging a little. By dawn, I was a zombie, eyes gritty, nerves shot. Crawled out of the van, stretching my stiff back, and scanned the ground. Found some weird marks in the dirt near the tires. Deep, uneven gouges, like something dragged itself around. Not hoofprints, not paws. Made my skin crawl, but I kicked dust over them. Could have been anything. Wind, a branch, whatever. That smell was fainter now, mixed with the dry sage scent of the desert. I shook it off and fired up the stove for coffee. Sipping that bitter brew, I debated my next move. Plan was to stay a few days, sketch more, soak in the vibes. But after last night, I wasn't feeling it. Vanlife's about freedom, sure, but it's also about not being stupid. I've bailed on spots before when they got sketchy. Like that truck stop in Utah where some creep kept circling my van. I could head to 29 Palms, grab supplies, maybe crash closer to town. Problem was, gas was low, barely enough to get there. Rookie mistake not filling up earlier. I poked around the wash behind the van, curiosity getting the better of me. Big mistake. Found a scrap of something. Leather, maybe, half buried under a rock. Old, cracked, stained dark. Looked like part of a shoe sole, but who'd lose that out here? Tossed it back, wiping my hands on my jeans. The gouges were there too, trailing off into the scrub. Didn't like that one bit. Felt like I was trespassing on something I shouldn't have. Back at the van, I noticed the paint, scratches on the side, shallow but fresh. Could have sworn they weren't there yesterday. My stomach twisted. Maybe I'd brushed a bush pulling in, but these looked too straight, too even. I ran my fingers over them, trying to laugh it off. Chill, Tessa, it's just wear and tear. But that thump replayed in my head, loud and close. Decided I'd leave by noon, get gas, find a new spot, shake this creepy feeling. Noon rolled around, and I was packing up, sketchbook, stove, all the little bits that make the van home. That's when I heard it, not a thump, but a low hum, almost a moan, coming from the rocks. Stopped dead, coffee mug still in hand. It wasn't wind, too steady, too alive. My mouth went dry. Looked around, empty desert, sun blazing, but that sound chilled me to the bone. Dropped the mug, didn't even care when it cracked on the ground. I climbed into the driver's seat, keys shaky in my hand. The hum kept going, louder now, like it was circling the van. Started the engine. Thank God it turned over quick and peeled out, kicking up dust. Didn't look back, just focused on the road ahead. 29 Palms was maybe 20 miles, close enough if I didn't stall. The hum faded as I drove, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Felt like I'd dodged something bad, but not by much. Halfway there, the gas light blinked on, perfect timing. Pulled over to check my spare can, empty. Forgot I'd used it last week in Nevada. Cursed myself for being so sloppy. The desert stretched out, quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. That moan stuck with me. echoing in my head, and those scratches on the van, they weren't random. Something was out there, and I just pissed it off. I was white-knuckling the wheel, coaxing the van toward 29 Palms with the gas gauge screaming empty. The desert blurred past, all rocks and spiky trees, but my eyes kept flicking to the mirrors. That hum was gone, thank God, but the quiet felt worse, like it was holding its breath. I'd left that wash behind, but the scratches on the van and that nasty smell stuck with me. My hands were sweaty, slipping on the steering wheel, and I couldn't shake the feeling I'd kicked a hornet's nest. The engine sputtered. Great, just what I needed. I nursed it along, praying I'd hit town before it died. Sun was high now, baking the van, and I was down to fumes. Then I saw it. A shadow, quick and low, darting between boulders off the road. Blinked hard, gone. Trick of the light, right? But my gut said no. Kept driving, faster than I should have on this beat-up rig, heart thumping loud enough to drown out the engine's whine. That's when the hum came back, louder, angrier, right behind me. I checked the rear view, nothing but dust. Then the van jolted, like something rammed it from below. I swerved, tires skidding, and yelled, couldn't help it. The whole frame shook, metal groaning, and I smelled it again, that sour stink, flooding through the vents. This wasn't a coyote or a bum. This was something scary, something that didn't belong out here. I floored it, van rattling like it'd fall apart, and the hum turned into a growl, deep, wet, vibrating through the seats. Glanced back, big mistake. Something was there, loping behind the van. Too fast, too big. Couldn't see it clear, just a blur of dark and bulk, kicking up dirt. My stomach dropped. This was horror movie crap, but it was happening to me, right now, in broad daylight. I gripped the wheel tighter, muttering no, no, no like that'd make it stop. The gas station sign popped up ahead, 29 Palms, 2 miles. Salvation, maybe, but the van wasn't gonna make it. Engine coughed hard, slowing me down. That thing was gaining, close enough I could hear its weight hitting the ground. Then it slammed the back doors, hard. Glass cracked, the frame buckled, and I screamed, swerving off the road into the dirt. The van bounced, jolting me against the seatbelt, and I tasted blood, bit my tongue. I yanked the wheel, tires spinning, trying to get back on pavement. The growl was everywhere now, inside my head, shaking my bones. Looked in the side mirror. There it was, clearer for a split second. Tall, hunched, with arms too long, dragging something. Leather? Skin? Couldn't tell, didn't want to. Its head snapped toward me, and I swear it had no face, just a dark smear where one should have been. Terror doesn't cut it. I was losing it, pure panic driving me now. The van limped back onto the road, engine gasping, and I pushed it past its limit. That thing kept pace, darting side to side like it was toying with me. Another hit, side panel this 9, denting it inward. I ducked, glass spraying from the cracked rear window, cutting my neck. Blood ran warm down my collar, but I didn't stop. Town was close. Lights, a gas pump, people. Had to make it, had to. I tore into 29 Palms, van smoking, and screeched into the first gas station. A couple old guys pumping gas stared as I stumbled out, yelling for help. The growl cut off, sudden as it started, and I spun around. Nothing. Just desert and my trashed van, leaking oil. My legs gave out, plopping me on the pavement, chest heaving. The guys ran over, asking what happened, but I couldn't talk, just pointed at the van, shaking. They helped me up, muttering about vandals or a hit and run, but I knew better. That thing wasn't human, wasn't anything I could explain. Blood dripped from my neck, stinging, and I kept scanning the horizon. The desert looked empty, but it wasn't. It was watching me. I'd made it here, barely, but this wasn't over. Whatever I'd pissed off was still out there, and it knew where I was. I was on my knees by the gas pump, blood dripping onto the cracked pavement, while those old guys hovered, asking questions I couldn't answer. My van sat there, a smoking wreck, dented, glass shattered, oil pooling underneath. The growl was gone, but my ears were ringing, and that sour stink clung to me like a bad dream. I scrambled up, legs wobbly, and yelled at them to call someone. Cops, rangers, anyone. One guy pulled out a phone, but I wasn't waiting around. That thing could be back any second. I stumbled to the van, grabbed my keys, still in the ignition, thank God, and tried to start it. Engine wheezed, sputtered, then died. Useless. My hands shook so bad I dropped the keys, fishing them off the floor mat covered in glass and blood. The guys were shouting now, telling me to calm down, but they didn't get it. This wasn't a hit and run. This was a nightmare chasing me. I bolted from the van, running for the gas station's little store, figuring walls might slow it down. Inside, the clerk, a kid barely out of high school, stared as I barged in, tracking blood across the linoleum. I yelled for a phone, a car, anything. He fumbled, pointing to a landline behind the counter. I dialed 911, voice cracking as I told them something attacked me. Trash my van was still out there. The operator sounded skeptical, kept asking if it was a person or an animal. Neither. I snapped, slamming the receiver down. No help coming fast enough. That's when the lights flickered. Not a power surge. Something hit the building, hard. The clerk yelped, dropping a bag of chips, and I ducked behind the counter. The growl was back, low and close, rattling the windows. I peeked out, saw it through the glass door, that hunched shape, moving fast across the lot. The old guys outside scattered, one tripping over a pump hose. It didn't go for them. It came straight for the store, slamming the door so hard the frame buckled. I grabbed the clerk, poor kid was frozen, and yanked him toward the back. We crashed through a storeroom, shelves toppling, cans rolling everywhere. The front door shattered, glass exploding inward, and that thing was inside, its growl filling the space. I shoved the kid toward a fire exit, kicking it open. We spilled into an alley, hot desert air hitting us, and I ran, dragging him with me. My neck burned, cuts stinging, but adrenaline kept me moving. We hit the street, dodging a pickup that screeched to a stop. The driver, a grizzled guy in a cowboy hat, leaned out, yelling what the hell was going on. I screamed at him to drive, piling into the bed with the clerk. He didn't argue, just peeled out, tires smoking. I clung to the side. Looking back, the thing burst from the alley, loping after us, too fast for anything natural. Its arms swung, dragging that weird leather scrap, and I swear it roared, a sound that made my teeth hurt. The truck hit 60, weaving through 29 Palms empty streets, and I kept my eyes on it. It was gaining. God, how was it gaining? The driver shouted something about the highway, and we swerved onto the 62, engine roaring. The thing kept up, a dark blur against the dusk, until we hit a straight stretch and floored it. My heart was in my throat, wind whipping my hair, blood crusting on my skin. Slowly, it fell back, disappearing into the desert haze. We didn't stop till we hit Yucca Valley, pulling into a diner lot packed with cars. I tumbled out, knees buckling, and the driver jumped down, face pale. The clerk was sobbing, curled up in the truck bed. People stared as I staggered toward the diner, yelling for a phone. Someone handed me a cell, finally, signal. Called Claire, voice shaking, told her I was in deep shit and needed her to wire me cash, fast. She freaked, but I cut her off, just do it. I sat on the curb, truck guy pacing, clerk still a mess. Cops were coming, someone said, but I didn't care. That thing was still out there, and I'd barely made it. My van, my home, was gone, trashed back in 29 Palms. I hugged my knees, trying to breathe, but every shadow made me flinch. This wasn't over. I could feel it in my bones. The diner buzzed around me. Waitresses gawking, truck guy arguing with a cop who'd just rolled up. I was numb, sitting there with a borrowed jacket over my shoulders, blood drying on my neck. Claire wired me money, enough for a bus ticket out of this hellhole. The cop took my statement, scribbling about a wild animal attack, but his eyes said he didn't buy it. I didn't care, couldn't explain what I'd seen without sounding nuts. Just wanted out of Southern California, back to Boise, anywhere safe. They towed my van, or what was left of it. Cops said it was totaled, frame bent, windows gone, like a bomb hit it. I didn't argue. Everything I owned was in there, sketchbooks, clothes, my whole damn life. But I wasn't going back for it. The clerk got picked up by his mom, still crying. Truck guy, Hank, he said, offered me a ride to the bus station. I nodded, too tired to talk, and climbed into his cab, clutching the cash Claire sent. The ride was quiet, just the hum of the engine. Hank kept glancing at me, finally muttering, "What the hell was that thing?" I shook my head, didn't know, didn't want to. Dropped me at the station, and I bought a ticket to LA, first leg back to Idaho. Sat on a bench, waiting, every noise making me jump. The desert stretched out beyond the lot, dark and endless, and I couldn't shake the feeling it was watching me. Bus came, and I climbed on, sinking into a seat by the window. Thought I'd feel better leaving, but that growl echoed in my head, a loop I couldn't stop. My big mistake was thinking I could handle van life alone. Out there, cut off, no backup. Should have stayed closer to people, not chase some Instagram dream into the middle of nowhere. The bus rolled out, Yucca Valley fading, and I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I'd escaped. Halfway to LA, the bus slowed. Traffic, some wreck up ahead. I stared out the window, restless, when I saw it. A shape, hunched and dark, moving parallel to the highway, just beyond the lights. My chest tightened. No way. It couldn't have followed me this far. But there it was, keeping pace, that leather scrap dragging behind it. I pressed my face to the glass, breath fogging it up, and it turned, that faceless smear locking onto me. I banged on the window, yelling for the driver to go faster. Passengers stared, muttering, but he just grumbled about the jam. The thing veered closer, cutting through the scrub, and I knew I'd screwed up again. Thought I could run, but it wasn't letting me go. The bus lurched forward, finally moving, and it lunged, slamming the side, rocking us hard. Screams erupted, glass cracked, and I ducked, curling up as it hit again, metal screeching. The driver swerved, tires squealing, and I heard it roar. Wet, furious, shaking the whole bus. Something broke through, a claw, an arm, raking the seat in front of me, shredding it. Blood sprayed. Not mine, someone else's. Chaos exploded, people scrambling, the bus fishtailing. I crawled under my seat, sobbing, as it hit again, tipping us. The world spun, glass and metal flying, and we crashed hard, rolling into the ditch. I came to, pinned under wreckage, pain screaming through my leg. Blood everywhere, mine, others. The bus was a mangled heap, moans and cries cutting through the dark. That growl was there, close, circling. I tried to move, couldn't. My phone was gone, Claire's cash scattered. It loomed over the broken window above me, faceless, huge, and I knew this was it. My dream, my freedom, all ending in a twisted pile off the 62. Last thing I heard was that growl, low and final, as it reached in. Should have stayed in Boise. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 29 years old, and I'm from Reno, Nevada. Back there, it's all casinos and snow-capped mountains. Decent, but I got sick of the grind. Last year, I ditched my bartending gig, cashed out my savings, and snagged a used Sprinter van off some guy on Craigslist. Fixed it up myself. Bed, mini fridge, a solar setup that's clutch. Been roaming ever since, chasing warm weather and cheap tacos. This time, I rolled into Southern California, aiming for a quiet spot near Santa Barbara to kick back. The drive down was smooth. Highways cutting through desert, then bam, you hit the coast, all cliffs and blue water. I pulled into a spot I'd scoped out on X, a dirt pull-off just past El Capitan State Beach. Tucked behind some trees, perfect for stealth camping. Sun was setting, turning the ocean this wild pink, and I cracked the van's back doors, letting the salt air roll in. Felt like I'd hit the jackpot. No rent, no boss, just me and the road. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, popped it open, and leaned against the van, watching waves crash below. My old roommate, Max, keeps texting me about his soul-sucking retail job back in Reno. Send him a pic of the sunset. Eat your heart out, dude. He fired back a middle finger emoji. Fair enough. Out here, I'm living the dream, even if it's just me and this rusty van holding it together. Santa Barbara's got this chill, rich kid vibe. Big houses up the hills, surfers dotting the water. My spot was off the radar, though. No signs, no nosy neighbors. I've got Nevada plates, so I parked tight against the trees to stay low-key. Learned that after a ranger in Oregon gave me grief. Hate those early wake-up calls. Tonight, I was set. Cold beer, a bag of chips, and a view that'd make anyone jealous. Night crept in, and I locked the doors. Old habit from too many nights in dicey truck stops. My van's got these blackout shades I rigged up, keeps it dark and cozy. Flipped on a little battery lamp, grabbed my beat-up guitar, and strummed a few chords. Not good, but it passes the time. The ocean roared outside, steady and loud, drowning out my shaky notes. Felt good, like I'd finally found a slice of peace. Then the wind picked up, rattling the branches against the van. Nothing big, just enough to make me pause. I cracked a window. Fresh air's a perk of this life, and caught a whiff of something off. Not fishy, more like burnt rubber, sharp and nasty. Checked my trash, clean. Sniffed the fridge, fine. It was outside, drifting in from the cliffs. Figured maybe a car blew a tire up on the 101. Closed the window and went back to strumming. I was halfway through butchering a Springsteen riff when something scraped, slow, loud, right along the van's side. Froze, guitar picks slipping from my fingers. It wasn't a branch, too heavy, too deliberate. My pulse kicked up. Probably just a raccoon or something, right? Southern California's got critters. I set the guitar down, listening hard. The waves kept crashing, but that scrape came again, closer, like it was circling me. I grabbed my flashlight, flicked it on, and aimed it out the window. Beam hit the trees, the dirt, nothing else. The scraping stopped, and I let out a shaky laugh. Ethan, you're losing it, man. Too many late nights, too much solo time. But that smell was stronger now, sneaking through the cracks, making my eyes water. I double-checked the locks, telling myself to chill. Just the wind, just my head playing tricks. Lying back, I stared at the van's ceiling. Got a little constellation of glow-in-the-dark stars I stuck up there, my cheesy touch. Was drifting off, beer still in hand, when it hit again. Bam, a thud against the back doors. Hard enough to shake the whole van. I jolted upright, spilling beer everywhere, heart slamming. This wasn't a raccoon. Something was out there, and it wasn't messing around. I sat there, beer soaking my shirt, staring at the back doors like they'd bust open any second. That thud still echoed in my head. Too loud, too solid for some critter. My flashlight was shaking in my hand, beam bouncing off the walls as I tried to breathe. Told myself it was nothing. Maybe a branch fell, or a wave tossed something up the cliff. But that burnt rubber smell was thicker now, choking me, and deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. Morning took forever to show up. I didn't sleep, just sat, listening, waiting for another hit. Nothing came, but the quiet felt heavy, like it was daring me to move. When the sun finally peeked through the shades, I climbed out, legs stiff, and checked the van. Big dent on the back doors, fresh and deep, like something heavy slammed it. No branches around, no rocks big enough. My stomach twisted. Whatever did this wasn't playing around. I grabbed my coffee pot, hands still shaky, and brewed some instant crap on the tailgate. Kept scanning the trees, the cliffs, expecting what? A bear? A drunk surfer? Nothing showed. Found some weird marks in the dirt, though, long, jagged scratches trailing toward the cliff edge. Looked like something dragged itself down there. Kicked sand over them, trying to shake the chill creeping up my spine. Maybe I'd imagined the thud's force. Van's dent easy, right? Sipping coffee, I weighed my options. Plan was to chill here a few days, surf if I could borrow a board, soak in the coast. But after last night, Santa Barbara didn't feel chill anymore. Gas was decent, could make it to Ventura or even LA if I bailed now. Problem was, I'd spent most of my cash on that beer and chips back in SLO. Moving meant dipping into my emergency stash, and I hate touching that. Decided to stick it out one more day. Dumb, yeah, but I'm stubborn. Mid-morning, I hiked down to the beach, needing air. Passed a couple joggers who barely glanced at me. Guess my scruffy look screamed van guy. The water was cold, crashing hard, and I waded in, letting it snap me awake. Kept thinking about that dent, those scratches. Found a piece of something washed up, black, rubbery, stinking like the smell from last night. Tossed it back into the waves quick. Didn't want it near me. Felt like a bad omen. Back at the van, I noticed the side window, smudged, like something pressed against it. Not a handprint, more like a smear, greasy and dark. Wiped it off with my sleeve, but it left a mark on the glass, faint but there. My gut said leave, but I brushed it off. Ethan, you're overreacting, man. Fired up the stove for lunch, ramen, my road staple, and burned my tongue slurping it down. Classic me, always screwing something up. By afternoon, clouds rolled in, gray and thick, dimming the whole vibe. The cliffs loomed darker, waves pounding louder. I strummed my guitar again, trying to chill, when that smell hit hard, sharp, overwhelming, like it was right outside. Then I heard it, a low, raspy hiss, not the wind, coming from the trees. Dropped the guitar, heart kicking into overdrive. It wasn't loud, but it was close, slithering through the air like it knew I was listening. I grabbed my flashlight, even though it was daylight, and peeked out. Nothing moved, but the hiss kept going, slow and steady, circling the van. My hands were sweating, slipping on the light. Told myself it was a snake or something. Southern California's got rattlers, right? But this felt bigger, meaner. I slammed the window shut, locked everything tight, and sat there, pulse racing. The hiss faded, but the air felt wrong, heavy, like it was waiting for me to slip up. Night fell, and I couldn't shake it. Kept pacing, 4 steps one way, 4 back, trying to decide. Leave now, burn my gas and cash, or tough it out and hope it was nothing. That dint glared at me through the dark, a reminder I wasn't imagining this. The hiss came back, fainter but there, drifting up from the cliffs. I climbed into the driver's seat, keys in hand, ready to bolt, but something told me moving might make it worse. I sat in the driver's seat, keys dangling, staring out the windshield into the dark. That hiss was still there, faint but creeping closer, cutting through the waves like a knife. My hands were sweaty, itching to turn the engine over and peel out, but I couldn't move. Felt like if I did, I'd set something off. The van was locked tight, shades down, but that burnt rubber smell was seeping in, thick and nasty, making my head spin. This wasn't a snake. Snakes don't dent metal. The hiss stopped, sudden and sharp, and I held my breath, waiting. Then it hit. Bam! Something slammed the side of the van, rocking it hard. I yelled, dropping the keys, flashlight clattering to the floor. The whole frame groaned, and I scrambled to grab the light, swinging it toward the windows. Nothing outside, just black, but the van shook again, a second hit. Lower, like it was testing me. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my teeth. I flicked the flashlight on, beam shaky, and aimed it at the side window. That smear was back, bigger, wetter, pressed against the glass like something leaned in close. I gagged, the smell hitting me full force, and clicked the light off fast. Didn't want to see more. The hissing started again, right outside, slow and deliberate, circling the van. Whatever it was, it knew I was in here, and it wasn't leaving. I lunged for the keys, jamming them into the ignition. The engine sputtered. Come on, don't do this to me now. Another hit. This time the back doors, hard enough to crack the dent deeper. I twisted the key again, and the van roared to life, headlights flooding the trees. That's when I saw it. Holy hell. A shape, tall and twisted, slipping out of the beam. Too big, too fast, dragging something black and limp behind it. My stomach dropped. This was straight up horror, and I was living it. I threw the van into gear, tires spinning in the dirt, and floored it. The hiss turned into a screech, high, ragged, like metal on metal, and the van jolted, something raking the side. Metal screamed, glass shattered somewhere behind me, and I swerved, barely keeping it on the path. Didn't look back, just drove, headlights bouncing, trees blurring past. My hands were shaking so bad I could hardly steer, but I wasn't stopping. The road twisted up toward the 101, cliffs on one side, ocean roaring below. That screech followed, loud and close, like it was right on my tail. I glanced in the side mirror. Big mistake. It was there, loping after me, a dark bulk with arms too long, dragging that black thing. Rubber? Flesh? Couldn't tell, didn't care. No face, just a void where one should have been, and it was gaining. Terror doesn't cover it. I was losing my mind, pedal to the floor. I hit the highway, tires squealing on pavement, and pushed the van past 70, way more than it was built for. The engine whined, shaking hard, but I didn't let up. Glass crunched under my boots, wind howling through the busted rear window. The screech faded, just a little, and I risked another look. Nothing in the mirror. Maybe I'd lost it. Kept driving, heart slamming, blood dripping from a cut on my hand I didn't even feel till now. I blew past a sign, Goleta, 5 miles. Town, lights, people, safety, maybe. The van was trashed, side torn up, back window gone, but I was alive. Pulled into a gas station lot, engine ticking as it cooled, and just sat there, panting. Blood smeared the wheel. My shirt. Didn't know where it was coming from anymore. The attendant stared through the window, but I didn't move. That smell lingered, faint but there, like it had stuck to me. Then I heard it, soft, distant, drifting up from the cliffs I'd left behind. That hiss again, low and patient. My chest tightened. I'd made it out, barely, but this wasn't over. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't done. It was waiting, and I'd just given it my scent. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, knowing I had to keep moving, but not sure where to go. I sat in that gas station lot, hands locked on the wheel, blood dripping onto my jeans. The van was a wreck, side gashed, back window gone, engine coughing like it was on its last leg. That hiss still buzzed in my ears, faint but real, and I knew I couldn't stay put. Valletta's lights glowed around me, but they didn't feel safe, not with that thing out there. I twisted the key, praying the van had one more run in it, and floored it out of the lot, tires squealing on wet pavement. The 101 stretched ahead, dark and slick from a drizzle I hadn't even noticed. I pushed the van hard, wind screaming through the busted window, glass crunching under my boots. My hand stung, cut deep from the shard I'd grabbed without thinking, but I ignored it, eyes darting to the mirrors. Nothing yet, just highway and shadows, but that burnt rubber smell clung to the air, thick and wrong. My gut said it was coming, and I wasn't wrong. The screech hit, loud, piercing, right behind me. I swerved, nearly clipping a semi, and there it was in the rear view, loping down the highway, too fast, that black thing dragging behind it. Cars honked, veering out of its path, but it didn't care, just charged straight for me. I floored it, van shaking past 80, engine screaming. The speedometer needle danced like it was about to snap. My heart was in my throat. This was it, life or death, and I wasn't ready to lose. It slammed the back of the van, hard. Metal crumpled, the whole thing fishtailed, and I fought the wheel, tires skidding. Another hit, lower, rocking me forward. Glass sprayed, cutting my cheek, and I yelled, swerving into the next lane. Headlights flashed past, drivers freaking out, but I couldn't stop. That thing was relentless, screeching like a banshee, and I saw it clearer now. Tall, twisted, no face, just a dark maw where one should have been. Horror doesn't cut it. I was staring death down. I yanked the wheel, aiming for an exit, some off-ramp into Carpinteria. The van bounced hard, suspension groaning, and I took a curve too fast, scraping the guardrail. Sparks flew, metal shrieked, but I kept going, praying the narrow streets would slow it down. The screech followed, closer, and I glanced back. It was leaping, clearing ground like nothing. My hands shook, blood slicking the wheel, and I knew the van couldn't outrun it much longer. I hit a residential stretch, houses, lights, people, and laid on the horn, swerving through. A dog bolted out of my way, someone yelled from a porch, but I didn't stop. The thing was still there, tearing up the road behind me, smashing a mailbox like it was paper. I took a sharp turn, tires smoking, and the van groaned, engine faltering. Come on, just a little more. It lunged, raking the side, and I felt the whole frame buckle, tipping me toward the ditch. I corrected hard, slamming the gas, and shot onto a main drag, stores, a few cars, civilization. The screech faded, just a little, and I risked a look. Nothing in the mirror. Kept driving, weaving through Carpinteria, till I hit a truck stop, pulling in with the van coughing smoke. Climbed out, legs jelly, blood dripping from my face and hand. A couple truckers stared as I stumbled toward the diner, yelling for a phone. Didn't care how I looked, just needed out. Inside, I grabbed the guy's cell off a table, sorry man, and dialed Max, told him I was screwed, van trashed, something after me. He thought I was drunk till I screamed about the cuts, the dents. Said he'd drive down from Reno. 8 hours, but I didn't have 8 minutes. The truckers crowded me, asking what hit me, but I couldn't explain, just pointed at the van, shaking. That smell was still there, faint, mocking me. I sank onto a bench, chest heaving, watching the dark beyond the lot. Thought I'd lost it. Maybe. Carpinteria felt safe, busy, normal. But then I heard it, soft, slithering up from the road I'd taken. That hiss again, patient, waiting. My blood ran cold. I'd run, fought, bled, but it wasn't letting go. I was trapped, and it was closing in. The diner hummed around me, truckers arguing, coffee brewing. But I was zoned out, clutching that borrowed phone. Blood crusted on my cheek, my hand throbbed, and the van sat outside, a mangled heap. Max was coming, but too late. I could feel it. Cops showed up, took one look at the van, and started asking about hit and runs or drunk drivers. I laughed, bitter, wish it was that simple. Told them something attacked me, trash my life, but they just scribbled notes, skeptical as hell. I begged a trucker for a ride, anywhere north, away from Santa Barbara. He nodded, a big guy named Roy, and I climbed into his rig, leaving the van behind. Everything I owned, guitar, clothes, my freedom, was in that wreck, but I didn't care. Roy fired up the engine, pulling onto the 101, and I slumped against the window, watching Carpinteria fade. Thought maybe I dodged it. That distance would save me. Dumbest mistake I ever made. We hit a quiet stretch, cliffs on one side, ocean black below, when that hiss slithered through the cab. Roy frowned, muttering about the wind, but I knew. My stomach dropped, and I twisted around. There, in the side mirror, that shape, loping along the shoulder, keeping pace. Faster, I yelled, slamming the dash. Roy cursed, pushing the truck to 70, but it didn't matter. It was there, relentless, dragging that black scrap like a trophy. It lunged, slammed the trailer, rocking the whole rig. Roy swerved, yelling, and I braced myself as it hit again, metal screeching. The cab shook, windshield cracking, and I saw it up close. Twisted limbs, no face, just that dark void staring through me. Roy lost it, jerking the wheel, and we veered off the road, tires skidding on gravel. The truck tipped, slow at first, then fast, crashing down the embankment toward the cliffs. Everything spun, glass exploding, metal crumpling, Roy screaming next to me. We hit hard, rolling once, twice, till the cab slammed into a boulder. Pain ripped through my side, my leg. Something snapped, wet and loud. Blood filled my mouth, warm and coppery. The truck settled, groaning, and I coughed, pinned against the dash. Roy was quiet, too quiet, slumped over the wheel, neck twisted wrong. That hiss filled the air, close now, circling the wreck. I clawed at the door, jammed, panic choking me. It climbed onto the cab, heavy, deliberate, shattering what was left of the windshield. Glass cut my arms as I swung at it. Useless, desperate. No face, just that void, and those long arms reaching in, dragging that black thing. My guitar strap, shredded, tangled in its grip. My life, my dream, torn apart. I yelled for Max, for anyone, but no one heard. It grabbed me, claws sinking in, and I felt the pull. Sharp, final. Blood pooled under me, mixing with Roy's, and I knew I'd screwed up bad. Should have stayed in Reno, poured drinks, lived small. Vanlife was my escape, but it led me straight to this. Crushed in a ditch off the 101, with something I couldn't fight. Last thing I saw was that void, swallowing the stars above. The hiss turned soft, satisfied, as it yanked me free of the wreck. Max will find the van, maybe the truck, but not me. Southern California took everything. My home, my shot, my life, and left nothing but a bloody smear on the cliffs. The waves crashed below, loud and endless, like they were laughing. My name is Ethan Mercer. I'm 32 years old, and I've been living in Portland for most of my adult life. After losing my job as a graphic designer during company-wide layoffs, I decided to take a break from the conventional path. I sold most of my possessions, converted an old Ford Transit into a livable space, and hit the road 3 months ago. The freedom was intoxicating. Waking up to different scenery every day, meeting fellow nomads at rest stops, and documenting my journey on my modest travel blog. My van wasn't anything fancy, but it had everything I needed. A comfortable bed, a small kitchenette, solar panels on the roof, and enough storage for my camera equipment and clothes. Southern California had always been on my bucket list, especially the lesser-known spots away from tourist traps. The plan was to explore the coastline for a couple of weeks before heading inland to check out some of the desert landscapes. I'd been driving for almost 10 hours straight from my last stop in Big Sur when I reached Ojai Valley. The sunset painted the mountains in eerie shades of orange and red. They call it the pink moment here, but something about it felt unsettling today. Maybe it was just my exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. I'd connected with another vanlifer named Danny through an online forum. She claimed to know a secluded spot near Lake Casitas where rangers rarely patrolled. Perfect for a few days of peace and incredible stargazing, she'd said. We'd never met in person, but she had over 50,000 followers on her travel account, so I figured she was legitimate. She messaged me the coordinates and mentioned she was currently in Arizona, but would be heading back this way in a few days. The thought of having a knowledgeable guide to show me around was appealing. The narrow road leading to the spot was barely visible in my headlights as I drove deeper into the wooded area. My GPS signal started glitching about a mile in, but I continued following the crude map Danny had drawn for me. The trees grew denser, their twisted branches creating disturbing shadows that danced across my windshield. I nearly missed the small clearing she described, hidden behind a cluster of old oak trees. It was larger than I expected, enough space for several vehicles, though mine was the only one there now. After parking, I stepped outside to stretch my legs. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. No distant traffic, no human sounds whatsoever. The air smelled of sage and something else I couldn't quite identify, metallic, almost. My headlamp revealed a makeshift fire pit surrounded by stones, evidence that others had camped here before. There were a few empty beer cans scattered around, and what looked like animal bones piled near the tree-line. Probably from someone's barbecue, I reasoned, though the sight made me uneasy. I noticed strange markings carved into several trees, symbols I didn't recognize. They appeared old, the edges of the carvings weathered and darkened with time. I snapped a few pictures, thinking they might make an interesting addition to my blog post. As I walked the perimeter of the clearing, my boots crunched on something brittle. I crouched down and discovered numerous small animal skeletons, rodents mostly, arranged in an almost deliberate pattern. Wildlife behavior can be weird, I told myself, though a sense of discomfort began creeping up my spine. Back in my van, I prepared a quick dinner of canned soup and crackers. The temperature had dropped considerably, and a thin layer of fog was beginning to form just above the ground. Through my side window, I noticed a faint light moving between distant trees, probably another camper with a flashlight. I considered going to introduce myself, but decided against it. People come to these places for solitude, after all. Still, I made sure to lock my doors before settling in with my laptop to edit some photos from earlier in the trip. Around midnight, I was startled awake by what sounded like someone tapping on my roof. Tap, 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 rhythmic and deliberate. I froze, listening intently. The tapping stopped, then started again, moving from the roof to the side of the van. Wind and branches, I told myself, though the night was still. I pulled back my curtains slightly, but could see nothing in the pitch darkness. My phone showed no service, but I noticed 3 missed calls from an unknown number, all within the last hour. That was impossible. I hadn't heard my phone ring. I tried calling back, but the call wouldn't connect. A text message came through, "Leave now." The sender was listed as Danny. Sleep didn't come easily after that. I kept hearing movements outside, soft footsteps circling my van, whispered conversations just below the threshold of comprehension. Once, I could have sworn I heard a child laughing, which made no sense out here. Just before dawn, I finally drifted off, my dreams filled with twisted trees and shadowy figures watching me from the forest edge. When I awoke to morning light streaming through my windows, I almost convinced myself it had all been my imagination playing tricks. Almost, until I stepped outside and saw them. Dozens of fresh footprints surrounding my van. Some human, others definitely not. The footprints disturbed me more than I cared to admit. Some were clearly from boots or shoes, different sizes, suggesting multiple people, while others were narrow, elongated impressions that reminded me of animal tracks, but not any animal I could identify. I followed them to the edge of the clearing where they simply vanished, as if their owners had simply disappeared into thin air. My phone still showed no signal, and when I checked my text messages again, the warning from Danny was gone. I scrolled through my call history. The 3 missed calls had vanished too. My uneasiness deepened into genuine concern. I decided to scout the area in daylight. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for everything. Local kids playing pranks, perhaps. The forest looked less threatening under the morning sun, but something still felt off. The trees grew unnaturally close together in some places, their trunks twisted around each other like lovers embracing. I discovered a narrow trail leading away from the clearing and followed it for about 20 minutes until it opened onto another, smaller clearing. In the center stood what appeared to be an old well, its stone edges crumbling with age. Next to it was a weather-beaten sign with faded lettering, Casitas Mining Company, 1887. I hadn't realized there had been mining operations in this area. Curiosity got the better of me. I approached the well and peered over its edge. The darkness below seemed to extend forever, and the damp air rising from its depths carried that same metallic smell I'd noticed the night before. I took out my phone to use as a flashlight and accidentally dropped it. I watched in horror as it tumbled into the blackness, the light spinning wildly until it disappeared without even a splash. My stomach knotted, not just from losing my phone, but from the realization that the well seemed impossibly deep. With no way to communicate with the outside world now, I felt truly isolated. Returning to my van, I weighed my options. The rational part of me said I should leave, find somewhere with cell service, and maybe avoid camping alone for a while. But another part, the stubborn, adventurous part that had led me to adopt this lifestyle in the first place, argued that I was overreacting. I'd lost my phone in an old well and let my imagination run wild about some footprints that probably had perfectly normal explanations. Besides, Danny was supposed to arrive in a couple of days. I decided to stay one more night, but move my van to a different spot within the clearing, closer to the entrance path. As I was reorganizing my equipment, I noticed something stuck to my van's undercarriage, a small burlap pouch tied with dark red string. I pried it loose and opened it cautiously. Inside were tiny bones, possibly from birds, arranged around what looked like a human tooth. My blood ran cold. This was no random occurrence or kids playing pranks. Someone had deliberately placed this under my vehicle. I threw the pouch into the fire pit and watched as the flames consumed it, hoping I wasn't making things worse by destroying it. That afternoon, as I sat outside reading, I noticed a hiker approaching from the main trail. He appeared middle-aged, with a weathered face and a serious expression. "You shouldn't be camping here," he said without introduction. His name was Martin Reeves, he explained, a local who often patrolled these woods. "This area has a history," he continued vaguely. "Bad things happen to folks who stay overnight." When I mentioned Danny and her recommendation, his expression darkened. "Never heard of anyone by that name guiding people around here. How'd you say you found this spot again?" Martin's warnings only intensified my unease, but I didn't want to admit how rattled I was becoming. He offered to show me a proper campground about 10 miles down the road. Safe, with rangers and other people, but I politely declined. Something about him seemed off, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. As he turned to leave, I noticed a symbol tattooed on the back of his neck, identical to one of the carvings I'd seen on the trees. "If you're staying," he called over his shoulder, "don't make noise after sundown. They're drawn to sound." Before I could ask who they were, he disappeared back into the forest. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but as sunset approached, an unnatural silence fell over the clearing. No bird calls, no insects buzzing, just complete, oppressive quiet. I started my van and tried to leave, suddenly convinced that staying was a terrible idea. The engine sputtered and died after just a few feet. I tried again with the same result. Popping the hood revealed nothing obviously wrong, but I'm no mechanic. As darkness descended, I locked myself inside. Windows closed despite the growing heat. I powered up my solar generator and turned on every light I had, creating a bright sanctuary against the gathering darkness outside. A thick fog rolled in as night fell completely, reducing visibility to just a few feet beyond my windows. Occasionally, dark shapes moved through the mist, too tall and thin to be human, their movements jerky and unnatural. I told myself it was just trees swaying in the wind, but there was no wind. Around 10 o'clock, I heard voices calling my name, voices that shouldn't have known it. "Ethan," they whispered from different directions. "Ethan, come outside." I covered my ears and hummed loudly to drown them out, remembering Martin's warning about sound attracting them. The night grew increasingly bizarre. My watch stopped at 11:37 p.m., and my solar-powered lights began to dim despite the battery showing full charge. The temperature inside my van plummeted until I could see my breath forming clouds in the air. The tapping returned, more insistent this time, moving systematically around my vehicle. Through a gap in my curtains, I glimpsed pale faces pressing against my windows. Not quite human faces, their features blurred and eyes too large, too dark. When I blinked, they vanished, only to reappear at another window. Sleep was impossible as terror gripped me completely. I huddled under my blankets, a kitchen knife clutched in my trembling hand, counting the minutes until dawn. The scratching started around 3 a.m., subtle at first, then increasingly aggressive, as if dozens of fingernails were dragging across my van's exterior. The sound set my teeth on edge and sent shivers racing down my spine. Something heavy thudded onto my roof, causing the entire van to shake. I clutched my knife tighter, my knuckles turning white from the pressure. A voice that sounded disturbingly like Danny's called out, "Ethan, please let me in. It's freezing out here." But there was something wrong with the cadence, like someone trying to mimic human speech without fully understanding it. My solar lamps flickered and died completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. In that moment of blindness, I heard my van's side door unlock with a click. Impossible. I had the only key, and it was clutched in my sweaty palm alongside the knife. The door began sliding open slowly, letting in the bone-chilling night air and swirling fog. I lunged forward and slammed it shut, fumbling to relock it. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of what stood outside. A tall, emaciated figure with limbs too long for its body, skin stretched tight over an almost skeletal frame. It tilted its head at an impossible angle, regarding me with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. Dawn couldn't come soon enough, but when it finally did, it brought little comfort. The fog remained, unnaturally thick and limiting visibility to just a few yards. My van was covered in scratches, deep gouges in the metal that hadn't been there before. Worse, crude symbols matching those on the trees had been carved into my doors and windows. The side mirror on the driver's side had been snapped off completely, and when I found it 20 feet away, the reflective glass had been meticulously removed, leaving just the plastic casing. I tried starting my van again with no success. Opening the hood revealed the source of the problem. Several important components had been removed from the engine. The battery cables were cut, spark plugs missing, and various hoses sliced through. This damage hadn't been done by animals or supernatural entities. This was deliberate human sabotage. My mind flashed to Martin and his strange warning. Was he responsible? Had he disabled my vehicle after I refused to leave? I needed to get help, which meant hiking out to the main road. Based on my calculations, it was about 7 miles through unfamiliar forest. Gathering only essentials in my backpack, water, energy bars, my portable solar charger, a flashlight, and my knife, I locked my van and set off down the trail. The fog made navigation challenging, and several times I found myself veering off the path. Strange sounds echoed through the trees, whispers and soft laughter that seemed to follow me. Once, I could have sworn I heard my own voice calling from the distance, though I hadn't uttered a word. Time behaved strangely too. My watch had started working again, but seemed to run at inconsistent speeds, sometimes showing minutes passing in seconds. After what felt like hours of walking, I should have reached the main road, but instead found myself back at the old well. Disoriented and increasingly panicked, I tried a different direction only to emerge once again at the same clearing with the well. It was as if the forest was deliberately redirecting me, keeping me trapped in some sort of supernatural loop. As I stood there contemplating my next move, I noticed fresh dirt around the well's edge that hadn't been there before, as if something had recently clawed its way out. With the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon, desperation set in. I couldn't be caught in these woods after dark again. I climbed the tallest nearby tree, hoping to spot the road or any sign of civilization from above the fog. The view from 30 feet up was disturbing. The fog appeared to form a perfect circle around the area containing my campsite and the well, with clear skies beyond. Even more alarming, I could see people moving at the perimeter of the fog bank. Ordinary-looking hikers and tourists who seemed completely unaware of the unnatural boundary they were walking along, as if it were invisible from their side. As I climbed down, one of the branches snapped under my weight. I plummeted the last 10 feet, landing hard and twisting my ankle. The pain was immediate and intense, but it was nothing compared to the horror I felt when I heard something respond to the noise. Movement in the underbrush, converging on my location from multiple directions. I hobbled away as quickly as my injured ankle would allow, following no particular path, simply trying to put distance between myself and whatever was coming. The forest grew darker by the minute, shadows elongating and deepening. I glanced back once and immediately wished I hadn't. Dark figures were sliding between the trees behind me, moving with unnatural speed and grace. Night was falling, and I was lost in these haunted woods with no shelter and no protection. Up ahead, I spotted what appeared to be a small cabin partially hidden by overgrowth. Desperation overrode caution, and I limped toward it as quickly as possible. The wooden structure was old but intact, with a solid door and windows too small for anything large to climb through. Inside, dust covered everything. A small table, a chair, shelves with ancient canned goods, and a rusty wood stove. The cabin appeared abandoned for decades, yet a series of photographs hung neatly on one wall. Black and white images of miners, dated from the late 1880s to early 1900s. In every photo, the same tall, thin figure stood in the background, face blurred or turned away. The most recent photo showed a group of modern-looking campers, likely from the 1990s based on their clothing, smiling in the very clearing where I'd parked my van. The tall figure stood among them, its features distorted. With trembling hands, I turned the photo over. Written on the back in faded ink were the words, "They're still smiling because they don't know yet." I barricaded the cabin door with the table and chair, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the task. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, and with it came the sounds, whispers, scratching, and occasional thumps against the cabin walls. Through a crack in the window shutters, I caught glimpses of pale figures circling the cabin like sharks, their movements jerky yet purposeful. They never fully revealed themselves, staying just at the edge of visibility. The photographs on the walls seemed to watch me, the faces of the smiling campers now appearing more like grimaces of terror than expressions of joy. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted rapidly, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The wood stove stood cold and empty. I checked for firewood earlier, but found none. Now, frost was forming on the inside of the windows, creating delicate patterns that seemed to morph into those same symbols I'd seen carved into the trees. My injured ankle throbbed painfully, the joint swollen to nearly twice its normal size. I fashioned a crude ice pack using my bandana and some snow-like frost that had accumulated on the windowsill, hoping to reduce the swelling enough that I could run if necessary. Around midnight, the whispers outside changed to something even more disturbing, my own voice, reciting private thoughts I'd had over the past few days. Things I'd never spoken aloud were now being parroted back to me from the darkness. Then came other voices, my mother calling my name the way she had when I was a child, my ex-girlfriend laughing the way she used to before we broke up. These entities, whatever they were pulling sounds from my memories, using them as lures. The psychological manipulation was perhaps more terrifying than any physical threat. A sudden silence fell, more unnerving than the previous sounds. Then came 3 distinct knocks on the door, not the frantic scratching from before, but deliberate, almost polite knocks. "We know you're injured, Ethan," came Martin's voice. "Let us help you." I remained frozen, silent. "The forest doesn't let people leave easily," he continued. "But there are ways to appease it. Open the door, and I'll show you how." His voice sounded almost normal, but there was an underlying wrongness to it, like hearing a familiar song played slightly off-key. The knocking came again, more insistent. "The longer you wait, the hungrier they get," Martin warned. "They haven't fed properly in months. Last fellow who came through, skinny guy, barely a mouthful. But you'd sustain them for weeks." I heard him sigh. "There are 2 ways this ends, Ethan. You open the door and help us with the ritual, quick, mostly painless, or they break in eventually and take their time. Trust me, you don't want the second option." I frantically searched the cabin for anything I could use as a weapon or an escape tool. Under the bed, I discovered a rusted hunting rifle, completely unusable, and a miner's helmet with a lamp attached. The lamp was ancient but appeared intact. Praying it might work, I connected it to my portable charger. To my amazement, it flickered to life, casting a weak yellow glow. Among the old canned goods, I found a bottle of kerosene, still partially full and sealed. An idea formed. Not a great one, but better than waiting to be taken. The banging on the door grew louder, and I could hear wood splintering as something powerful threw itself against the barrier. My makeshift barricade wouldn't hold much longer. Working quickly, I soaked rags torn from my shirt in kerosene and stuffed them into empty food cans. The miners' helmets had a flint striker for the lamp, primitive but functional. I created several makeshift fire bombs, hoping they might buy me precious seconds of distraction. Just as the door began to give way, I smashed the window at the back of the cabin. The opening was small, barely large enough for me to squeeze through, but it would have to do. I lit the first of my improvised devices and threw it toward the front door just as it crashed open. The kerosene ignited with a whoosh, illuminating multiple figures surging into the cabin. What I saw in that brief, terrible moment of clarity will haunt me forever. Martin at the front, his face partially melted into something inhuman, and behind him, towering figures with elongated limbs and too many joints, their skin pulled tight over jutting bones. I forced myself through the window, glass cutting my shoulders and back. The moment my feet hit the ground outside, I lit and dropped another firebomb, creating a wall of flames between me and the cabin. The fire caught quickly on the dry brush, spreading faster than I'd anticipated. Screams, not human screams, erupted from inside as the flames engulfed the structure. I didn't wait to see more. Ignoring the searing pain in my ankle, I ran, the miner's lamp on my head bobbing wildly, illuminating just enough of the path ahead to keep from crashing into trees. Behind me, the fire spread through the drought-dry forest with frightening speed, creating an inferno that lit the night sky orange. Part of me felt guilty for starting a forest fire, but another part hoped it might purge whatever ancient evil inhabited these woods. I ran without direction, simply trying to put distance between myself and what I'd seen in the cabin. My injured ankle threatened to give out with every step, but pure adrenaline kept me moving. The miner's lamp flickered weakly, its battery fading faster than it should have. I don't know how long I ran before stumbling into a stream. The cold water shocked my system as I fell to my knees, gasping for breath. Looking back, I could see the glow of the fire in the distance, but something else caught my attention. Dark figures moving through the trees, circling around the blaze, coming in my direction. They hadn't been destroyed by the fire. They were pursuing me. And based on their movement pattern, they were herding me towards something. The realization hit me too late. I'd been running downhill, following the path of least resistance, exactly what they wanted. Ahead loomed a familiar clearing, barely visible in the dim light of my failing lamp. In its center stood the old well, its stone lips seeming to glow with an unnatural blue light. The figures behind me were closing in, driving me forward. To my horror, something was emerging from the well, a massive, shifting shape that seemed to absorb what little light remained rather than reflect it. I was trapped between the pursuing entities and whatever ancient horror was rising from the depths of the earth. In desperation, I plunged into the stream and began following it downstream. Water seemed to confuse the entities. They paced along the banks but hesitated to enter the current. The freezing water numbed my injured ankle, allowing me to move faster despite the slippery rocks. After what felt like hours of wading through increasingly deep water, the stream widened into a small river. In the distance, I heard the most beautiful sound imaginable, car engines on what had to be a road. Civilization was near. As false dawn lightened the eastern sky, I saw it, a bridge spanning the river, with the outline of a highway beyond. I'd found a way out. As I dragged myself up the muddy riverbank toward the highway, relief flooded through me. The first hints of sunrise painted the sky in hopeful shades of pink and gold. A few early morning commuters drove past, their headlights cutting through the lingering darkness. I must have looked like a madman, soaked, bloodied, limping, and wild-eyed. No one stopped until an elderly man in a pickup truck finally pulled over, concern etched into his weathered face. "Son, you look like you've been through hell," he said, helping me into his passenger seat. I couldn't stop shaking, whether from cold, shock, or lingering terror, I wasn't sure. His name was Joseph, a retired ranger who'd worked these forests for over 40 years. As he drove me toward the nearest hospital in Ventura, I told him everything, the words pouring out in a frantic jumble. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly grave. When I finished, expecting disbelief or concern for my mental state, he simply nodded. "The old Casitas mining operation," he said quietly. "That area's been trouble since the 1800s. We lost 3 rangers there in '94, officially blamed on a wildfire, but they never found the bodies." He glanced at me. "You're lucky to be alive, son." At the hospital, doctors treated my physical injuries, the sprained ankle, lacerations from the glass, and the early stages of hypothermia. But they could do nothing for the psychological trauma. While waiting for my discharge papers, I used the hospital phone to contact the authorities about my abandoned van and the forest fire I'd started. The fire department informed me that strangely, despite the dry conditions, they'd found no evidence of a wildfire in the area I described. Not even a scorched tree, the dispatcher said, confusion evident in her voice. Joseph offered to drive me back to the forest's edge to speak with the ranger station about my van. Despite every instinct screaming against it, I agreed. It contained everything I owned. We arrived at the ranger station near Lake Casitas around noon. The head ranger, a serious woman named Rivera, listened to my story with professional detachment. "We don't have any record of a Martin Reeves working here, past or present," she said after checking their files. When I mentioned the old mining well and cabin, she looked genuinely perplexed. "There's no well or cabin in that sector. That area was surveyed extensively last year. It's just ordinary forest." Ranger Rivera agreed to accompany us to where I'd left my van. The drive was tense, my anxiety mounting with every mile. Joseph remained behind at the station while Rivera and I, along with 2 other rangers, took a Park Service vehicle down the narrow road I remembered. Everything looked different in daylight, and from inside a car rather than wandering lost on foot. When we reached what should have been the clearing, I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. There was no clearing, just dense forest without a break in the trees. "This is impossible," I whispered, stepping out of the vehicle. It was right here. The rangers exchanged looks that clearly questioned my sanity. Rivera suggested we fan out to search the area, though her tone made it clear she expected to find nothing. As they moved away, something caught my eye. A familiar symbol carved freshly into a nearby tree. My blood ran cold. Looking more carefully at our surroundings, I noticed other signs. The trees here grew in the same unnaturally twisted pattern I remembered, and the air carried that faint metallic smell. We were in the right location. The clearing had simply been reclaimed by the forest somehow. As I stood frozen in realization, my phone, which the hospital had charged for me, buzzed with a text message. "Wrong choice, Ethan." It read, from a number identified as Danny. My hands trembled as another message appeared. "They're hungry again already." I looked up to call to the rangers and realized I couldn't see or hear them anymore, though they'd only walked a short distance away. The forest around me had gone completely silent. Then I heard it, the now familiar tapping sound, coming from all directions at once. I ran, screaming the rangers' names. My injured ankle buckled beneath me, sending me sprawling across the forest floor. As I struggled to rise, my hand came down on something partially buried in the leaves, a small metal object. I recognized it instantly, the side mirror from my van, the glass still missing. Nearby, half covered by undergrowth, lay other parts one recognized from my vehicle. A door handle, fragments of solar panels, a piece of a license plate. My van hadn't been stolen or towed. It had been dismantled, consumed by the forest and its inhabitants. Before I could process this horror, I heard Ranger Rivera calling my name. Relief washed over me as I spotted her uniform through the trees. I limped toward her, desperate to escape this nightmare once and for all. Only as I drew closer did I notice something wrong. Her movements were too stiff, her expression blank. "We found your van, Ethan," she said, her voice slightly off-pitch. "It's just over this rise. Come see." Behind her, the other rangers emerged from between the trees, moving with the same unnatural gait, their faces expressionless masks. In that moment, I understood with terrible clarity. I hadn't escaped at all. Everything since my rescue, Joseph, the hospital, the ranger station, had been an elaborate illusion, a cruel game. I'd never left these woods. The entities had simply created a narrative I would accept, leading me right back to where they wanted me. As this realization struck, the faces of the rangers began to shift and melt, revealing the true horrors beneath their human disguises. Behind them, partially hidden by trees, stood a tall, painfully thin figure I recognized from the photographs, the entity that had been haunting these woods for over a century. I turned to flee, but found my path blocked by Joseph, his kindly face now twisted into something inhuman, his mouth stretched impossibly wide to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. "The forest provides for those who provide for the forest," he said, his voice overlapping with others, as if multiple beings spoke through him simultaneously. You could have joined us willingly, like Martin did. Now you'll join us another way. The pseudo-rangers closed in from all sides, herding me toward the tall entity waiting patiently among the trees. My final, desperate attempt to escape led me straight to where they had always been guiding me. The old well, which had somehow appeared again in a clearing that hadn't existed moments before. As hands that were no longer human seized me from all sides, I caught a glimpse of movement within the well. Countless pale, elongated limbs reaching upward, belonging to those who had come to these woods before me and never left. I recognized with horror that the well wasn't just a structure. It was a mouth, an entrance to something ancient and hungry that lived beneath the forest floor. The last thing I saw before they forced me over the edge was a van pulling into the clearing. A young couple, looking relieved to have found such a perfect camping spot. The woman checked her phone, smiling at something on the screen. Probably directions sent by someone named Danny, someone they trusted but had never met. As I fell into the darkness, I heard their cheerful voices echo across the clearing, unaware that the cycle was beginning again, that their fate had been sealed the moment they entered these haunted woods. The forest was hungry, and it would be fed. My name is Ethan Mercer. I'm 34 years old, and I've been living in Portland for most of my adult life. 8 months ago, I quit my suffocating corporate job, sold almost everything I owned, and converted a 2012 Sprinter van into my new home. Freedom was what I craved, the ability to work remotely as a web designer while exploring the country. My Instagram page, Mercer's Wanderings, had even gained a modest following of fellow van enthusiasts and wanderlusters. I'd visited 16 states already, but California's coastline was calling my name. The October evening when I crossed into Southern California was unusually warm. The setting sun painted the sky in deep oranges and purples as I navigated the winding coastal highway. The view was breathtaking, waves crashing against jagged cliffs, the vast expanse of ocean stretching to the horizon. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in weeks. My golden retriever, Banjo, sat in the passenger seat, his head hanging out the window, tongue lolling in the salty breeze. I'd been planning to visit Joshua Tree National Park, but after checking a few online forums, I'd learned about a secluded beach area near San Clemente that was supposedly perfect for stealth camping. According to the posts, rangers rarely patrolled there, and several van lifers had stayed for days without issues. The spot sounded perfect, remote enough for privacy, but close enough to civilization if I needed supplies. My van, which I'd named Prosperity, was my pride and joy. I'd spent 3 months building it out, installing solar panels, a composting toilet, a small kitchen with a propane stove, and a surprisingly comfortable platform bed. The walls were lined with Baltic birch plywood, and I'd even splurged on a tiny shower system that I could set up outside when needed. It wasn't luxurious by conventional standards, but it was my sanctuary. As I pulled into a gas station near San Clemente, I noticed a man watching me from beside the convenience store. He was tall and gaunt, with deeply tanned skin that spoke of years under the harsh California sun. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, but something about his gaze left me feeling unsettled. I tried to shake off the feeling as I filled my tank and picked up some provisions. Inside the store, I struck up a conversation with the cashier, a friendly woman in her 50s named Nancy. When I mentioned my plans to camp near the beach, her smile faltered. "You might want to consider the state campground instead, honey," she said, her voice lowered. "It's only $20 a night, and it's got facilities." When I asked why, she just shrugged and said something vague about recent disturbances in the area. Back in my van, I pulled up the location on my phone again. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with the most recent one posted just 3 days ago. Surely if there were serious problems, someone would have mentioned it. I decided Nancy was probably just being cautious with an out-of-towner. Besides, I'd stayed in plenty of remote locations before without incident. My pepper spray and Banjo had always been protection enough. The road to the beach was narrow and poorly maintained, winding through dense brush before opening up to a stunning vista of the Pacific. I passed 2 other vehicles on my way, a beat-up Suburb with Oregon plates and a small RV that looked like it had seen better days. Both were parked in separate clearings, far enough apart to provide privacy, but close enough to be visible. I took comfort in knowing I wasn't completely alone. As dusk settled, I found a perfect spot, a small clearing surrounded by shrubs that provided natural screening, with the ocean visible through a gap in the vegetation. I could hear the rhythmic crashing of waves against the shore, a sound that always lulled me to sleep. I parked, made sure I was level, and set about preparing a simple dinner of pasta and canned sauce. Banjo circled the area, sniffing excitedly at the new environment. Everything felt perfect, but as darkness fell completely, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the encroaching shadows, someone was watching me. I woke up around midnight to Banjo's low growling. My dog rarely made noise at night, so my heart immediately started racing. I sat up in bed and fumbled for my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness of my van's interior, illuminating Banjo's rigid posture. He was standing at the window, hackles raised, staring intently into the darkness. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, but he didn't acknowledge me, just continued his focused vigil at something I couldn't see. Moving carefully to avoid making noise, I peered through the curtain beside him. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the landscape, transforming the peaceful beach scene into something more sinister. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the silver-tipped waves and the shadowy outlines of coastal vegetation. Then movement caught my eye. A figure was standing about 50 yards away, partially obscured by brush, completely motionless. I couldn't make out any features, just a human-shaped silhouette, watching my van. My mouth went dry. I let the curtain fall back into place and tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was another camper taking a late-night walk. Maybe it was someone fishing. But at midnight? And why would they be standing so still, facing my van? The cashier's warning echoed in my mind. I considered packing up and driving away, but the thought of navigating that narrow, treacherous road in complete darkness seemed more dangerous than staying put. Instead, I double-checked that my doors were locked and moved my pepper spray from my backpack to beside my pillow. Sleep didn't come easily after that. I lay awake, listening to every sound. The waves crashing, the occasional rustling of vegetation in the breeze, and once, what sounded disturbingly like footsteps circling my van. Banjo remained alert, occasionally shifting positions, but never relaxing. By the time dawn broke, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. The figure I'd seen was probably just another nature enthusiast. Southern California was full of eccentric types. After all, morning brought clarity and confidence with its bright sunshine. I took Banjo for a walk along the beach, and the breathtaking beauty of the coastline washed away my nighttime anxieties. We passed the small RV I'd noticed yesterday, but it appeared unoccupied. The Suburb was gone. As we walked, Banjo suddenly pulled toward a cluster of rocks, nose to the ground, intensely interested in something. When I caught up to him, I noticed what had captured his attention. A small collection of items arranged in what seemed like a deliberate pattern. A child's worn shoe, 3 tarnished coins placed in a triangle, and a faded photograph face down on the sand. My skin prickled with goosebumps despite the warm morning sun. Something about the arrangement felt ritualistic, disturbing. When I flipped over the photograph with a stick, I wished I hadn't. It showed a smiling family standing in front of a van not unlike my own, but someone had scratched out all of their faces with what looked like a knife. I dropped the photo, suddenly feeling exposed on the open beach. Banjo whined, sensing my distress. We hurried back to prosperity, my earlier ease completely evaporated. As I approached my van, something wasn't right. I was certain I'd closed all the curtains before our walk, but now one window was clearly uncovered. I scanned the surrounding area, but saw no one. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door and carefully checked inside. Nothing seemed to be missing or disturbed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. The sensation of violation was overwhelming. I needed information. Using my cell phone's spotty reception, I searched for news about the area. After several attempts, I found a local news site with an article from 6 months ago. 3 separate groups of campers had reported vandalism to their vehicles in this exact location. The incidents had stopped, and police had attributed them to local teenagers. Nothing violent had occurred, but the article mentioned that one family had found disturbing symbolic arrangements near their campsite. My blood ran cold. Should I leave now, in broad daylight when the road would be safer to navigate? Or was I overreacting to what might be completely unrelated events? The decision was made for me when my van wouldn't start. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch, making a sickening grinding noise that I'd never heard before. Panic rose in my throat as I tried again and again. After the sixth attempt, I popped the hood and stared at the engine, though I knew little about vehicle mechanics. What I did know was that yesterday my van had been running perfectly, and now, after finding that disturbing shrine on the beach and possibly having someone enter my vehicle, it mysteriously wouldn't start. This couldn't be a coincidence. I was stranded in a place that was becoming increasingly sinister by the hour. I tried calling for roadside assistance, but my phone showed no service. Strange, since I'd been able to browse the internet just minutes earlier. I climbed to higher ground, desperately waving my phone in different directions, hoping to catch a signal. Nothing. It was as if something was blocking the reception specifically around my van. The sense of isolation was crushing. I was cut off from help, from civilization, from safety. Returning to my van, I noticed something that sent ice through my veins, a crude symbol drawn in the dirt beside my vehicle. It resembled a spiral with small marks radiating from it, like a stylized sun. The same symbol had been in the background of the scratched-out family photograph. This was no coincidence. Someone was clearly targeting me, and they wanted me to know it. I felt a primal fear surge through me, the kind of terror our ancestors must have felt when realizing they were being hunted. I decided to seek help from the RV I'd seen earlier. Safety in numbers, right? With banjo at my side and my pepper spray in hand, I walked the quarter-mile to where it had been parked. As we approached, I could see the RV was still there, but something was wrong. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding thin and frightened even to my own ears. No response. Drawing closer, I saw that the interior had been ransacked, cabinet doors flung open, belongings scattered across the floor. On the small dining table lay a map of the area, with our current location circled in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I backed away from the RV, pulling banjo with me. That's when I noticed the footprints in the sand, several sets, leading away from the RV toward the denser vegetation inland. Among them was a single set returning to the beach, larger than the others and more deeply pressed into the sand, as if the person had been carrying something heavy, or someone. The implications were horrifying. Had the RV occupants been attacked? Abducted? I was trembling now, torn between trying to follow the tracks to potentially help whoever had been taken and fleeing to save myself. Before I could decide, I heard it, a sound that will haunt my nightmares forever. From somewhere in the dense brush came a low, guttural chanting, barely audible above the sound of the waves, but unmistakably human. Multiple voices, speaking words I couldn't understand in a rhythmic cadence that raised the hair on my arms. I ran, banjo, and I sprinted back to my van, no longer caring about stealth or caution. Inside, I locked the doors and pulled all the curtains shut, then curled up on the floor with my loyal dog, trying to control my panicked breathing. My mind raced through options. I could try to fix the van, unlikely, wait for another visitor to the beach, who might also become a victim, or attempt to hike out along the road, exposing myself to whoever was out there. There were no good choices. As afternoon faded into evening, I tried the engine again with no success. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a clean slice through one of the main wires connecting to the battery. This was deliberate sabotage. Someone had cut my wiring while Banjo and I were walking on the beach. I tried to reconnect it with electrical tape from my emergency kit, but the engine still wouldn't turn over. Whatever they'd done, it was more complex than a simple wire cutting. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the beach. Through a small gap in my curtains, I spotted movement, 3 figures emerging from the vegetation. They moved with an unnatural synchronization, walking slowly but purposefully toward the abandoned RV. Even from this distance, something seemed off about their proportions, their limbs too long, their movements too fluid. I couldn't make out their faces, but they appeared to be wearing some kind of dark clothing. One carried what looked like a staff with objects dangling from it. As darkness fell completely, more figures joined the first 3. They formed a circle around a small fire that they'd lit near the RV, their elongated shadows dancing grotesquely on the sand. The chanting grew louder, rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. I could now see that they wore elaborate masks, animal faces twisted into disturbing expressions. This was no teenage prank. This was something ancient and malevolent. And from the methodical way they occasionally turned toward my van, I knew with terrifying certainty that I was next on their agenda. I had to get out. The cult, or whatever they were, seemed focused on their ritual for now, but it was clearly escalating. I had maybe an hour before they turned their full attention to me. Banjo sensed my fear, pressing his warm body against my leg as I frantically gathered essential supplies: water, protein bars, my pocket knife, flashlight, and first aid kit. I stuffed everything into my backpack along with my wallet and phone, though the latter seemed useless now. The chanting outside had risen to a fever pitch, punctuated by occasional shrieks that sounded less than human. I couldn't see the figures anymore through my curtains, but an orange glow suggested their fire had grown significantly larger. I needed a distraction. In my panic, I remembered the emergency flares in my roadside kit. If I could create a diversion on the opposite side of their gathering, maybe Banjo and I could slip away unnoticed and make it to the road. With trembling hands, I prepared my escape route. I would exit through the passenger side door, which faced away from their ritual site, then use the surrounding brush for cover. The road was about a mile away, and if we could reach it, we might flag down a passing car. It was a desperate plan, but waiting meant certain death. The family in the photograph and the occupants of the RV were grim testaments to that. Just as I was ready to implement my plan, a heavy thump landed on the roof of my van. Banjo growled, his eyes fixed upward. Slow, deliberate footsteps moved across the metal above us. Then came the scratching, long, dragging sounds like fingernails or claws digging into the surface of my home. A voice spoke directly above me, so close it might have been in my ear, speaking words in a language I'd never heard but somehow understood on a primal level. They were talking about sacrifice, about vessels, about the coming of something ancient from the sea. In blind panic, I abandoned stealth and burst out the side door, Banjo right behind me. I sprinted about 20 yards before daring to look back. What I saw defied reality. A figure perched on my van's roof that seemed to shift and distort in the firelight, its proportions impossible, its face a grotesque mask that might have been carved from driftwood. It made a sound like laughter, but horribly wrong, and then it called out to the others. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life, Banjo keeping pace beside me. Behind us, multiple sets of footsteps gave chase. The beach sand made running difficult, each step requiring extra effort as my feet sank slightly. I veered toward the tree line, hoping the denser ground would provide better traction. The vegetation whipped at my face and arms as I crashed through it, the sound of pursuit growing closer despite my desperate pace. The moonlight that had seemed eerie earlier now became my salvation, providing just enough illumination to navigate. We reached a steep embankment. At the top would be the road where I'd driven in yesterday, a lifetime ago. I scrambled upward, grabbing at roots and rocks, my lungs burning with exertion. Banjo struggled beside me, whimpering as the loose soil gave way under his paws. Behind us, the cultists had spread out, moving with an efficiency that suggested they knew these woods intimately. Halfway up the embankment, disaster struck. My foot slipped on loose gravel, and I tumbled backward, rolling several yards down the steep incline before crashing into a tree trunk. Pain exploded in my ribs, and I gasped for breath. Banjo barked frantically, running back to me. Through tears of pain, I saw one of our pursuers less than 50 yards away, moving through the undergrowth with that same unnatural fluidity, the mask catching moonlight in a way that made it appear alive. I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the stabbing pain in my side. "Run, Banjo," I urged, and we continued our desperate climb. The chanting had stopped. Now our pursuers communicated with whistles and clicks that sounded more like insects than humans. They were coordinating, trying to surround us. I changed direction, moving laterally across the embankment rather than straight up, hoping to throw them off. Finally, mercifully, we reached the road. It was deserted at this late hour, the asphalt gleaming dully in the moonlight. I had a moment of crushing despair. There were no cars, no lights in either direction. Just as I was about to break down, I remembered the flares. With shaking hands, I lit one and waved it above my head, the bright red light cutting through the darkness. "Help!" I screamed, my voice cracking with terror and exhaustion. "Please, somebody help us." The figures had emerged from the tree line now, forming a loose semicircle about 100 yards away. They made no move to approach the road, instead swaying slightly as if held back by some invisible boundary. The one in the center, taller than the rest, with a mask that resembled a deer's skull, raised a hand and pointed directly at me. The message was clear. This wasn't over. They were patient. They would wait. A miracle came in the form of headlights rounding the distant curve, a late-night traveler on this remote road. I waved the flare frantically, stepping into the center of the lane. The car slowed, then stopped, an older model pickup truck with a bewildered-looking middle-aged man at the wheel. "Please," I begged as he rolled down his window. "We need help. They're after us." I pointed toward the tree line, but the figures had vanished, melting back into the darkness as if they'd never existed. The driver, a local fisherman named Ray, was skeptical of my wild story but kind enough to give Banjo and me a ride to the nearest town. During the drive, I poured out everything that had happened, aware of how crazy it sounded. Ray listened silently, glancing occasionally in his rearview mirror as if expecting to see someone following us. When I finished, he didn't immediately dismiss me as I'd expected. Instead, he said quietly, "There's stories about that beach going back generations. Most folks around here won't go near it after dark." We reached a small coastal town where Ray knew the sheriff. Despite the late hour, we went directly to the police station. Sheriff Martinez took my statement, her expression giving nothing away as I described the cult, the sabotaged van, and the abandoned RV. When I mentioned the symbol drawn beside my van, something flickered in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or concern. She asked if I could draw it, and when I did, she exchanged a look with Ray that made my blood run cold. "We've seen this before," she admitted reluctantly. "There's been incidents along that stretch of coastline dating back decades. Most we can piece together as explainable: drifters, drug operations, territorial disputes. But some." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "We'll send deputies out at first light to check the area and recover your vehicle. In the meantime, there's a motel down the street where you and your dog can get some rest." The motel was run down but clean. After the terror of the night, even the lumpy mattress felt like luxury. Banjo curled up beside me, and despite my racing thoughts, exhaustion pulled me into uneasy sleep. I dreamed of masks and chanting, of symbols drawn in sand that shifted and changed when I tried to look directly at them. In my dream, I was back on the beach, but the ocean was rising impossibly fast, bringing with it something vast and ancient that the cultists had summoned. I woke to pounding on my door. Sheriff Martinez stood outside, her face grim. The deputies had found my van, but there was no sign of the RV I'd described or any evidence of a ritual site. No footprints except my own and Banjo's, no fire pit, nothing. "The strangest thing," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "is that there's nothing wrong with your van. Engine starts fine, no cut wires. Our mechanic says it's in perfect condition." My mind reeled. How was that possible? I knew what I'd seen. The sabotage had been real. I'd seen the cut wire with my own eyes. The implications were terrifying. Either I'd experienced some kind of psychotic break, or these people, these things, had connections that reached into the local authorities, allowing them to cover their tracks completely. Sheriff Martinez drove me back to Prosperity, which was parked exactly where I'd left it. Everything looked normal in the harsh light of day. Even the symbol beside the van was gone, the sand smooth as if it had never been disturbed. "We get a lot of out-of-towners having experiences in these parts," the sheriff said carefully. "Sometimes the isolation plays tricks on your mind. My advice: move on to Joshua Tree like you planned." Today, I didn't argue. Something in her tone told me it would be pointless, even dangerous. As she drove away, I noticed her police radio crackle with static, forming patterns that sounded disturbingly like the chanting I'd heard the night before. I loaded Banjo into the van and turned the key. The engine started immediately, purring as if it had never had any issues. As I drove away from that cursed beach, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being allowed to leave. That whatever had happened, whatever was happening in that place, wasn't finished with me. In my rearview mirror, I thought I glimpsed figures standing among the coastal vegetation, watching my departure. When I blinked, they were gone. I drove straight through to Arizona that day, putting as much distance between myself and Southern California as possible. But distance hasn't brought peace. Every night, I dream of masks and chanting. My phone periodically loses service for no apparent reason. Twice now, I've found wet sand beside my van when I wake up, though I've been parked miles from any beach. And sometimes, when Banjo stares intently into dark corners of the van, growling softly, I swear I can smell salt water and hear the rhythmic surge of waves. The most disturbing development came yesterday. While checking my Instagram account, I found a comment under my most recent post from a user with no profile picture. The username was a string of nonsensical characters, but the comment was clear enough. A series of symbols ending with the same spiral mark I'd seen drawn beside my van. Below it, 3 simple words that made my blood freeze. See you soon. I'm writing this from a campground in New Mexico, surrounded by other travelers, taking comfort in their presence. But I know it won't last. Whatever I encountered on that beach is patient and determined. They marked me somehow, chose me for something. The family in the photograph, the people from the RV, I suspect they thought they'd escaped too. My greatest fear isn't that they'll find me. It's that they never lost track of me at all. That I'm exactly where they want me to be, moving according to some plan I can't comprehend. And that when the time is right, when I least expect it, I'll look up to see those masks surrounding me once more. I'm Liam Patterson, 32 years old, and though I call Phoenix, Arizona my home, I've been drawn to the thrill of van life for years. I made the decision to convert my old Sprinter van into a mobile sanctuary, a place where I could escape the mundane and embrace the unknown. I packed up my life, fueled by wanderlust and a restless heart, ready to explore South California. I knew this was a huge step, but the promise of adventure outweighed any lingering doubts. I've always been fascinated by the eerie allure of abandoned places and the disturbing undercurrents of the unexpected, a mix that makes my skin crawl, yet pushes me forward. Driving into South California felt surreal. The long stretches of asphalt melted into the horizon as I cranked up the radio, tunes blending with the hum of the engine and my racing thoughts. I couldn't shake a nervous excitement that mingled with a sense of foreboding, a vibe that was both horror-inducing and strangely liberating. I parked my van in a secluded area just off a rarely used highway, letting the silence of the desert envelope me. It was a place that felt like it held secrets, whispers of past tragedies that made the night air feel scary and unnerving, like a scene straight out of a disturbing movie. As dusk settled, I began to set up camp, feeling every bit of the tension in the cool, desert air. The van's interior was a testament to long nights of hard work and restless dreams. I installed a few simple comforts, a fold-out bed, a small kitchenette, and personal mementos from my hometown. But nothing could erase the eerie feeling that something wasn't quite right. The environment around me seemed charged with an unsettling energy. Even the wind carried a hint of something ominous. That mix of horror and raw vulnerability was as disturbing as it was captivating, a perfect setting for what I presumed would be an unforgettable night. Before long, I wasn't alone in my adventure. My good friends Nina Rodriguez and Jack Sullivan, who share my love for the van life journey, had reached out and decided to join me for a brief stopover in South California. Nina, ever the practical spirit, always keeps a level head despite her quiet intensity, while Jack, with his unpredictable charm, adds a layer of unpredictable humor to any situation, even the scary and disturbing ones. Their presence made me feel a little less isolated, even as I couldn't shake the feeling that the night held more than just a few strange shadows and odd sounds. We spent our first evening sharing stories and laughing over a modest campfire, the glow of the flames dancing on our faces as we recounted past adventures. Yet, in between jokes and casual banter, there was an undercurrent of apprehension, a reminder that we were far from home, in a place that whispered of horrors unseen. The atmosphere felt heavy with both promise and peril. It was a disturbing blend of excitement and dread, as if we were unwitting participants in a dark, unfolding tale. Every rustle in the bushes and snap of a twig made our hearts beat faster, each sound a potential prelude to a horror that was both scary and profoundly real. I spent some time alone with my thoughts later that night, sitting on the hood of the van and watching the sky transform from twilight to a starlit canvas. The desert's vast emptiness made me reflect on all the decisions that led me here, on all the nights spent chasing freedom at the cost of a little sanity. It wasn't just about the open road. It was the lure of the disturbing unknown, the chance to confront fears that most would shy away from. I thought about the real-life horrors that I'd read about and seen in movies, where one wrong turn could lead to terror beyond imagination. This was my experiment in living on the edge of both excitement and despair. Yet, as the night deepened, so did the unsettling quiet that blanketed the campsite. I couldn't help but notice a strange stillness that contradicted the usual sounds of nature at night. It was as if the world had paused to catch its breath, and in that eerie pause, every shadow and subtle movement became amplified. The normally comforting sounds of nocturnal wildlife were absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that was both scary and profoundly disturbing. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a horror movie scene, a feeling that only intensified with every passing minute. I tried to shake off the disquiet, chalking it up to my overactive imagination fueled by long drives and isolation. I made a mental note to get some rest, even though sleep eluded me as my mind replayed every unsettling detail of the night. The van, usually a safe haven, now felt like a confined space in the midst of something vast and menacing. Each creak of the metal seemed to echo like a warning, and every shift of the wind outside was a reminder that the night held secrets far more disturbing than I could have imagined. It was an unsettling mix of dread and anticipation, a classic setup for a truly disturbing horror experience. Before I drifted off into a fitful sleep, I couldn't help but wonder what the coming hours would bring. The night was young, and South California's dark corners promised that nothing was quite as it seemed. I lay there, caught between the desire to surrender to sleep and the nagging feeling that something was waiting just beyond the flickering light of my van's interior. The sense of impending danger was palpable, as if the horror lurking in the shadows was gearing up for an inevitable appearance. And with that chilling thought, I slipped into a restless slumber, unaware of the terrifying twists that awaited in the hours to come. I woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling that something was off. As I sipped my lukewarm coffee by the van's window, I noticed unusual tire tracks circling the parking area. The scene felt both eerie and disturbing, a clear sign that someone or something had been nearby during the night. I couldn't shake the sense of horror that clung to every detail, and I knew this was no ordinary Vanlife stop. Nina's worried texts and Jack's uneasy phone call later confirmed my suspicions. We were not alone in this part of South California, and the growing dread was both scary and deeply unsettling. I decided to inspect the area around my van more carefully. While I walked along a narrow trail behind our makeshift campsite, I stumbled upon strange symbols etched into the earth and worn on a nearby rock. Each mark was a silent warning, as if nature itself was trying to communicate a disturbing message. The more I looked, the more the symbols felt like a precursor to an ominous event, filling me with a mix of horror and curiosity. I knew I needed to make some decisions quickly, whether to stay put or move on, and the weight of that decision pressed on me like a heavy fog. Back at the van, I gathered Nina and Jack to discuss what we'd all witnessed. Over a hastily prepared breakfast, we hashed out the possibilities, our conversation laced with both humor and nervous tension. Jack joked about us being part of a twisted horror movie, but his laugh barely masked the underlying anxiety in his voice. Nina, ever the cautious one, insisted we examine the surrounding area more thoroughly. The trio of us faced a choice: retreat to safety or confront the disturbing mystery head-on. The atmosphere was charged with both horror and a hint of reckless determination. Later that morning, as I made a call to a local contact in South California, I was met with vague but ominous warnings. The voice on the other end spoke in hushed tones about unexplained disappearances and accounts of terrifying encounters in the region. The conversation left me with a lingering sense of dread that was both scary and real, a horror that seemed to creep into every corner of our lives. Each word painted a picture of a place where danger lurked beneath the surface, and it became painfully clear that we were stepping into territory where every decision could have dire consequences. I spent the afternoon mapping out nearby locations that might offer refuge or clues to what we were facing. With Nina's help, We scoured local landmarks and historical sites, trying to piece together a pattern from scattered hints and eerie local legends. The research was both fascinating and disturbing, a reminder that our chosen route might intersect with dark, troubled histories. Every discovery was laced with the same grim sense of horror, making our situation feel like a twisted game of cat and mouse in a real-life scary thriller. It was a decision-making process that left us both intrigued and terrified. As dusk began to settle, the tension among us grew. I decided to drive a short distance to a nearby abandoned motel that locals claimed held disturbing secrets. The drive was marked by an unexplainable nervous energy and a series of eerie coincidences that made my skin crawl. The motel's dilapidated facade was a stark reminder of past tragedies, its broken windows and peeling paint speaking of long-forgotten horror. I parked the van a safe distance away, the decision to check out the motel driven by equal parts curiosity and the desperate need to uncover the source of our fears. Exploring the motel grounds, I encountered unsettling signs of recent activity. A fire pit still smoldering, half-buried objects, and inexplicable scorch marks on a nearby tree. Every step I took was accompanied by a growing sense of dread, as if I were being watched by unseen eyes. I felt a mix of adrenaline and horror, the atmosphere thick with the potential for something truly scary to happen. Each disturbing detail pulled me deeper into a web of uncertainty, leaving me questioning whether my van life adventure was turning into a dangerous, real-life nightmare. Later that evening, after reuniting with Nina and Jack, we huddled together around a small, flickering lantern inside the van. Our discussion turned to the possibility that someone, or something, was following us, leaving a trail of subtle yet undeniable signs. The conversation was punctuated by moments of dark humor and shaky resolve, as we weighed the risks of investigating further against the pressing need to ensure our safety. The air was heavy with the knowledge that every decision we made from that point forward could be a matter of life or death, adding an extra layer of horror to our already scary predicament. Before I headed to bed that night, I took one last look around the van's perimeter, searching for any indication of the mysterious presence. The silence was deafening, filled only by the whisper of the wind through the scrub and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. I couldn't shake the impression that something was waiting to reveal itself, a disturbing sign that our little adventure was spiraling into a horror story that was becoming all too real. With my heart pounding and my thoughts in disarray, I crawled into my makeshift bed, haunted by the unresolved tension and the looming threat that promised to make the night even more scary and disturbingly unpredictable. I woke to an unsettling silence that was more deafening than any sound. The early morning light barely pierced the gloom, and I could feel an ominous presence lingering outside the van. My sleep was disturbed by a series of soft, almost imperceptible thumps on the metal body, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or the van settling, but the unmistakable feeling of being watched made my heart race with horror. Every minute that ticked by felt like an eternity, each second filled with a scary, disturbing tension that I couldn't ignore. As I stepped outside to check for any signs of intrusion, I noticed footprints that seemed too deliberate to be natural. They were scattered around the campsite, etched into the soft earth as if someone, or something, had been pacing deliberately around my van. The marks were erratic, yet carried a disturbing symmetry that hinted at a planned approach. I felt like I was living in a real-life horror film, where every little clue was a grim omen of the terror that was about to unfold. With every step, the fear of the unknown grew, a feeling so scary it was almost tangible in the crisp morning air. In a burst of adrenaline-fueled clarity, I radioed Nina and Jack, telling them what I had discovered. The conversation was fragmented by our shared sense of dread, as we tried to make sense of the inexplicable evidence we were uncovering. Nina's voice trembled as she described similar markings near her temporary hideout, while Jack admitted he'd seen unsettling shadows lurking at the edge of his sight. The gravity of the situation sank in quickly. We were entangled in a series of events that felt as scripted as a disturbing horror movie. It was becoming painfully clear that whatever was stalking us was no ordinary trespasser. I decided to follow the trail of footprints away from the van, driven by a mix of determination and terror. Each step into the unknown felt like stepping deeper into a labyrinth of fear and impending danger. The barren landscape of South California became a stage for this surreal encounter, where every rustle of the wind or creak of distant structures amplified the horror of the moment. I could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking my movement, the silence broken only by my quickened breath and the subtle sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. The environment itself had turned into a character in this scary narrative. The tension escalated when I reached an old, decrepit building that looked abandoned for decades. The structure, with its broken windows and peeling paint, radiated an aura of decay that was both eerie and disturbingly inviting. I stepped closer, drawn by a macabre curiosity that overpowered my instinct to flee. Inside, faint traces of recent activity caught my attention: a discarded jacket, a smudged handprint on a dusty wall, and the lingering scent of smoke. Every detail screamed of something amiss, a silent warning that this was a place where horror had a tangible presence. I couldn't help but feel that I was on the verge of stumbling into a very real nightmare. Inside the building, I found remnants of hurried attempts to leave: a half-packed bag, a phone left charging on a counter, and scattered notes that hinted at a struggle. The discovery was disturbing beyond words, a set of clues left behind by someone who had clearly encountered the same threat we now faced. I sat on the cold floor, my mind racing as I pieced together the grim puzzle before me. The notes mentioned an entity that lurked in the shadows, a presence that was as terrifying as it was elusive, and every line dripped with the kind of horror that felt too real. The reality of the situation began to crystallize, each detail more scary and disturbing than the last. Back at the van, panic was starting to seep into our conversations. Nina's calls were frantic as she described hearing distant whispers and disembodied murmurs outside her temporary shelter. Jack, normally the voice of levity, was unusually quiet, his tone laden with fear as he recounted his own encounter with a dark silhouette moving in the periphery. The combined evidence was impossible to dismiss. Something malevolent was stalking us, and its intentions were far from benign. I tried to gather my wits, but the heavy dread and relentless horror made every decision feel like a life-or-death gamble. It was a scary, disturbing reality that none of us were prepared for. I barricaded myself inside the van, determined to fortify our makeshift home against the encroaching threat. Every creak and groan of the old vehicle now felt like a prelude to impending doom. The close quarters magnified every sound. Every whisper of the wind outside the window became a reminder of the dangerous presence lurking just beyond our fragile sanctuary. I kept the engine running low, half in the hope that its hum would ward off the darkness, while my mind raced through all possible escape plans. In that moment, it felt as though the horror we were experiencing was not just a figment of our imaginations. It was an active, terrifying force that could strike at any second. The night fell with an oppressive weight, and every minute in the darkness felt like a test of will. I sat by the dim glow of a battery-powered lantern, listening to the sounds of the night with bated breath. Outside, the world was eerily silent, punctuated only by intermittent noises that hinted at movement in the distance. My thoughts churned with images of what could be lurking in the shadows, a predator with unknown motives, moving with a chilling purpose. The fear was all-consuming, a blend of horror and terror that was as scary as it was paralyzing. I knew that the threat was real, and that the coming hours would decide whether we could escape this disturbing nightmare or be swallowed by it. I bolted awake in the dead of night, heart pounding like a drum in a scary, disturbing rhythm. The oppressive silence that had earlier haunted our campsite was shattered by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps and frantic whispers outside the van. My pulse raced as I scrambled to gather what little belongings I could, the horror of the situation sinking in deep. I knew that staying meant certain doom, and with a mix of terror and determination, I signaled to Nina and Jack that it was time to make a break for it. Every second felt like an eternity as the threat grew closer, pushing us to abandon the only shelter we'd known. In a burst of adrenaline, we flung open the van's door and sprinted into the moonlit desert, the chill of the night matching the fear coursing through our veins. The vast South California landscape, usually a haven of freedom, now morphed into a labyrinth of danger. The gravel crunched underfoot as we navigated winding trails and rocky outcrops, each step echoing the horrifying possibility of being caught. I could hear the sinister shuffle of what seemed like multiple pursuers behind us, and the realization hit hard that our van life dream had turned into a real-life nightmare. Every twist and turn of the path was a desperate bid to outrun the looming horror. As we ran, our minds raced with conflicting thoughts. The thrill of escape mingled with the stark reality of our predicament. I led the way, guided by instinct and the dim light of a distant horizon, while Nina and Jack followed close behind. The once comforting dark sky now looked foreboding, each star a silent witness to our terror. I recalled moments from past adventures that now seemed trivial compared to this life-or-death sprint. The sense of vulnerability was overwhelming, and the disturbing possibility of a tragic fate kept me running faster, each footfall a defiant act against the encroaching evil. The desert, once a canvas for our van life escapades, transformed into a chaotic battleground. I ducked behind a large boulder as a pair of headlights swept over the area, casting eerie shadows that danced with a disturbing precision. The sound of revving engines and muffled voices told me we were not just being hunted, but that our every move was being tracked by someone, or something, with malicious intent. In that moment, the horror became undeniably real, a scary, twisted chase that left us feeling small and desperate against an overwhelming force. I could almost taste the fear in the air as we regrouped for another frantic sprint. The escape grew more chaotic when a sudden, violent burst of noise erupted behind us. A car door slammed, and a low growl of engines signaled that our pursuers were closing in. Panic surged as I urged Nina and Jack to scatter and find temporary cover, all while I searched for a safe path through the rugged terrain. Every rustle in the dry brush sent waves of terror through me, and I could feel my hands shaking as I clutched my phone, desperate for a lifeline in this disturbing, fast-paced horror. It was a moment that blurred the lines between survival and a terrifying descent into madness. In the midst of our escape, a near miss left me frozen in a moment of paralyzing dread. I nearly collided with a rusted fence that bordered a desolate industrial lot, its presence a stark reminder of past tragedies and forgotten dangers. The sound of splintering metal and my own ragged breathing filled my ears as I scrambled to regain composure. Behind me, Nina's frantic shouts and Jack's determined footsteps spurred me on, each echo amplifying the gravity of our situation. Every heartbeat was a countdown to either salvation or a tragic end in this relentless, scary chase. Desperation set in as we reached the outskirts of a derelict warehouse, its broken windows and peeling walls offering a dubious refuge. With the threat momentarily at bay, we huddled in the darkened corridor, our breaths heavy with the weight of the horror we had escaped. The silence that followed was both a relief and a new kind of terror, as if the building itself were holding its breath. I scanned the area for any signs of danger while grappling with the reality of our dire situation. The fear was palpable, a constant reminder that even a brief moment of respite could turn into a disturbing trap at any second. We regrouped, and with no clear path to safety, the only option left was to risk one final escape through the maze of back alleys and abandoned lots. I led our small band of survivors through narrow, shadow-filled streets, each step forward laced with uncertainty and the disturbing sounds of pursuit echoing in the distance. The eerie interplay of light and darkness heightened every nerve, making each decision a life-or-death gamble. Our collective fear bonded us in that moment of extreme vulnerability, as we silently prayed that our next move wouldn't seal our fate in this scary, relentless horror. Finally, as we neared a winding road that promised a chance at escape, the air grew thick with a sense of impending confrontation. I could feel the pressure mounting like a vice around my chest, every instinct screaming that the worst was yet to come. The desolate road stretched before us, a pathway both to freedom and an unknown, disturbing destiny. I glanced at Nina and Jack, their eyes mirroring my own terror and resolve. The moment was fraught with tension, a pause before the storm, and with one final deep breath, we prepared to run headlong into whatever awaited us, a leap into a dangerous unknown that threatened to end our van life journey in a tragic, horror-filled climax. The confrontation was sudden and brutal, a culmination of the relentless terror that had hounded us for hours. As we burst onto a deserted highway, headlights blazed like the eyes of a predator, and a black SUV screeched to a halt beside us. The moment felt like a scene straight out of a disturbing horror flick, where every decision carried deadly consequences. I tried to steer us away, but fate intervened in the form of a split-second miscalculation, a fatal mistake that sent our van careening off the road. In that terrifying instant, the horror of our situation became all too real, and the scariest nightmare we could have imagined unfolded before our eyes. I remember the sound of shattering glass and the anguished cries that followed, each echoing in the chaos like a disturbing symphony of loss. The SUV's impact was catastrophic, and for a moment, time seemed to slow as I watched everything unravel. The abrupt collision turned our frantic escape into a scene of sheer devastation, with debris scattering and the van's structure groaning under the strain. In the midst of the disaster, Nina's terrified scream cut through the tumult, and Jack's voice was barely audible over the clamor of destruction. That instant marked a turning point, a horrifying realization that our attempts to flee had led us straight into a deadly trap. Struggling to regain my senses amidst the wreckage, I crawled out of the twisted metal, my body aching and my mind reeling from the shock. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning rubber, and every breath was a painful reminder of the tragedy that had just unfolded. I glanced around in a desperate search for my friends, the disturbing realization dawning on me that our lives had been irreversibly altered. The chaos was overwhelming, a collision of horror and regret that left no room for easy escape. Every moment felt like an eternity as I grappled with the reality that our van life dream had turned into an inescapable, tragic nightmare. In the immediate aftermath, I scrambled to help Nina and Jack, our desperate shouts mingling with the unsettling silence that followed the impact. Amid the wreckage, every detail was etched in my mind: the twisted metal, the scattered belongings, and the painful cries of those caught in the tragedy. I knew that this moment would haunt us forever, a disturbing reminder that sometimes the pursuit of freedom comes at a deadly cost. The horror of our situation was compounded by the sharp sting of loss and the bitter taste of regret. I could only pray that our struggle to survive wouldn't end in further tragedy, as the echoes of that catastrophic collision reverberated around us. As emergency sirens wailed in the distance, the harsh reality of our fate began to sink in. The scene was chaotic, a medley of flashing lights, panicked voices, and the disturbing remnants of what used to be our safe haven. I helped Nina to a safe spot, my mind racing with fragments of memories and shattered plans. Every minute in that grim moment felt like an eternity, the pain of the disaster mingling with an overwhelming sense of horror. The aftermath was a brutal mix of survival instincts and the heavy burden of guilt, each of us grappling with the knowledge that our reckless escape had led to this terrible, irreversible mistake. In the hours that followed, the deserted highway transformed into a grim tableau of tragedy. I watched helplessly as paramedics worked frantically to tend to the injured, their determined faces marked by the gravity of our situation. The surreal nature of the scene left me numb, a disturbing blend of disbelief and raw horror. The once promising horizon of our van life journey had darkened irreparably, leaving us stranded in a nightmare that was as deadly as it was real. I couldn't help but replay every moment in my mind, each decision a painful reminder of how quickly our lives had spiraled out of control. As night fell once more, the stark loneliness of South California amplified the tragedy that had befallen us. I found a quiet corner away from the chaos, my thoughts swirling with guilt, grief, and the horrifying understanding that sometimes our choices lead us straight into the jaws of disaster. The silence was oppressive, every minute a reminder of lives forever changed by a series of devastating, reckless decisions. In that haunting darkness, I began to piece together the fragments of a shattered reality, a sobering reflection on the cost of chasing freedom in a world filled with unpredictable horror. In a final, desperate bid for solace, I reached out to Nina and Jack, our voices trembling as we recounted the events that had led us to this tragic crossroad. We spoke in hushed tones about the mistakes we'd made and the terrible consequences that now bound us together. The conversation was punctuated by moments of bitter humor and sorrow, a disturbing attempt to find meaning in the chaos. Every word carried the weight of a painful truth. Sometimes, no matter how fast you run, the horrors of life catch up with you, leaving scars that might never fully heal. Even as the night edged toward an uncertain dawn, a lingering sense of foreboding refused to fade away. I stood on the roadside, staring at the wreckage with a mix of regret and grim determination, knowing that this was not the end of our story, but merely another dark chapter in a life haunted by tragedy. The disturbing echoes of that fatal mistake still rang in my ears, a stark reminder that the pursuit of van life freedom can sometimes lead you straight into a horror too scary to escape. As I braced myself for whatever uncertain future lay ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey, marred by loss and relentless terror, was far from over.